for Warriors This Week.
Curry with the catch. Curry, step back jumper on the way. Good at the buzzer. Ball game over.
Now, here's John Dickinson.
All right, it's 7 Giddings and Dan Devone here, as always, on Warriors This Week. Dan, my man, a lot has happened since the last time that we spoke. A week ago, 7 days, we got Draymond Green being reinstated. We got the Warriors getting booed twice at home. We also, as of last night, got them picking up a W, 140-131 in Chicago, in which the Splash Brothers combined for 56 points. But before we dig into everything that happened this week, because we got a lot on our plate, what's up, man? How you doing?
Good, brother.
Uh-oh.
Now I'm much better.
There we go. What's up, Dano?
How are things?
Oh, man, no complaints. I mean, look, this is the time of year where things, and the Warriors have been interesting all season long, no matter if they've been up, whether they've been down. Right now, their 2 games below 500. But especially with, the turn of the new year, everyone talks about how the basketball season doesn't really start until Christmas. And, of course, now we got a little under a month until the trade deadline. So we got a lot to dig into. And, of course, we want to hear from the people, whether it's about last week, whether it's about last night's game, and whether you want to chime in, get in on the conversation. Phone lines are always open at 888-957-9570. We see you on YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Appreciate everyone rolling in here as we get this thing going here on a Saturday. But, Dan, I'm excited, and where I do want to start is kind of off of last night. The Warriors right now, if you look at what they did against Chicago, well, they came from down 13, and, the Klay Thompson had a 30-point game. Stephen Curry saved his best for last in the fourth quarter. But, I'm curious, and the question that I have is, does the offense right now outweigh some of the concerns you have defensively? Because if you just look at the last 3 games, you look at 76 points in the first half against Toronto. You look at 73 points in the first half against the New Orleans Pelicans, and you also look at 75 points last night against the Chicago Bulls. So obviously the Warriors are an offensively capable team, but do you still think that defensively they got something they might need to dig a little bit deeper for?
Well, if they do dig, they're going to find one Draymond Green. To me, that's the correlation. There's a direct cause and effect. With the absence of Draymond Green, you're not a good defensive team, and I think that's a lot of what all of us are witnessing right now. It's the absence of your best defender, and it was going to catch up to you sooner rather than later. I think that going back to last night, I really didn't think they played all that poorly. And I know 75 points at a half is, that's not a good indicator. But I think the Golden State Warriors, and this is not to go back to the 2 previous games, I liked, quite frankly, the tempo, the flow. I thought it was good basketball on both ends, both by Chicago and that of the Golden State Warriors in the first 2 quarters. It's just Chicago couldn't miss. I'd also add this when we're talking about defense as it relates to the Warriors in just sort of a general sense, Ev, and that is, who plays defense these days in the NBA? And it's not that teams aren't capable. It's not as though coaches are not certainly aware of it and emphasizing defense wins. It's just it's such an offensive oriented game right now. Everybody has shot makers, Ed. Everybody can fill it up. Not only that, to compound things, let's just be honest here. The rules of the game right now are catered, like I've never witnessed before, for offensive productivity. There are times where defensively there's nothing you can do. And I think that refereeing and the game in general right now is slanted, so you're going to see these sort of big numbers. It's not only relegated to the Warriors. Look across the league. Mm-hmm. I mean, Portland got spanked by 62 by Oklahoma.
They did.
Utah took out Milwaukee the other night, and then Milwaukee put a spanking like Boston hasn't seen, I think, in going back to the 60s. So I think it's sort of it's plaguing the league when you're talking about the defense or the lack thereof.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good point. Like, I know the Warriors have had some lopsided L's, and the 36-point defeat on Wednesday was the worst of the Steve Kerr era at home. But you're right. Like, there's been a lot of, and I don't know if it just points to also the time in the season. Like, yeah, I think a lot of players point to January.
It's a weird month.
It's like the dog days of August in baseball, but it comes a little bit early because everyone's just trying to get to the All-Star break. Everyone's trying to get to that midway point in the season. And especially for the Warriors, who are a veteran-laden group or a pretty experienced team, I'm sure a lot of them are feeling it a little bit in their legs. You can see Steph Curry sometimes looking a little bit tired out there down the stretches of games. He wasn't last night. Neither was Klay Thompson, but they both did look at a little bit against Toronto as well as New Orleans. And so it's interesting to hear the tone of the team after those two blowout defeats in which they weren't really competitive at home to end the homestand. They ended up going 2-5 over the 7 games, and then see the effort that they came out with against Chicago. Because I don't know if it necessarily rights all the wrongs that we looked at throughout the week, but when I hear on Wednesday a head coach saying that his team has, for now, lost some of their spirit, lost a little bit of their confidence and some of their belief, to then go out on Friday and come away with an offensively geared and basically a game in which they outshot the Bulls. It was 12-round fight and they knocked them out towards the end. Everything right now for the Warriors does seem to be dependent on how well they shoot the basketball. And I just don't know if I'm willing to right now say, because they got a game later today. They play Milwaukee at 5 o'clock against the Bucks. So, back-to-back, that's probably going to be pretty tough. I'm not willing to say that after last night's game, they all of a sudden have their spirit, confidence, and belief back. But it's absolutely a step in the right direction.
It certainly is. And I think that those 3 qualities, not that all things this show are going to center around one Draymond Green, but think about it. Spirit, confidence, belief. I'll throw energy in there as well. All these intangibles. Who are we describing? I mean, whose resume is that? It's Draymond Green, essentially. Basically, what you're saying is we miss Draymond Green. Now, I know that's saying a lot these days because he carries so much baggage, but this team at times just misses his spirit, misses his confidence, which is infectious, and they miss, his belief, which is all the things that he instills in that basketball team. And so I think his absence, while they were able to get away with it, I think a lot of it was emotion with the infusion of some of the youth starting, but then after a while it caught up with him. That without Draymond Green, who, arguably, and according to me at least, he's your second best basketball player, this is a team that is very vulnerable in all 3 of those areas: spirit, confidence, and belief. It just speaks one Draymond Green. I would say last night, even though they gave up the 75 points, was one of the best basketball games they've played all year long. And certainly that third quarter, I'd say, when they put up 48 points, was by far their best quarter they have played to date in the 2023 season, or 2023-24 season now. And let me just add this.
Yeah.
I think that it wasn't so much, and let's get into this a little bit if you want, it wasn't so much, the lack of defense, but it was after hitting rock bottom, the way they came out and responded in terms of moving the ball, which clearly you could see last night.
Yeah, and I thought that, Steve Kerr made another starting lineup change. He comes out with Curry, Klay, Wiggins back into the starting lineup, and then Šarić, at the 4. So, maybe that's a position where the 5, last night manned by Looney, could be a position where Draymond slots in there. They hadn't used that combination or that starting lineup since, I believe, the first game against Denver. So, and I'm with you. Like in the first quarter, I thought they were good. The ball was moving, it was popping. And for the entire game, the fact that they had, 39 assists and 5 turnovers, that was the lowest or tied for the lowest amount of turnovers in franchise history, and certainly in recent memory. That was absolutely a good sign, Dan. So the fact that they're taking care of the basketball, like if they do that, I'm not saying just 5 turnovers, but we've talked about this ad nauseum. If you take care of the basketball, if your passing is crisp and you play with tempo and pace, this is a Warriors team that can run it up on anyone. Like offensively, there was no issues last night. They shot over 50%. They were nailing threes. I think they ended up taking 14 more shots than the Bulls because they took care of the basketball. And they did all of that without Draymond or Chris Paul, who's a guy that is known for taking care of the rock. So that was a great sign. And I do wonder if there was a little more focus and kind of overall effort just because of what had transpired. I don't think it was also a coincidence that getting away from the Bay Area with everything that had happened, being booed at home, hearing people rain down on this station, I might add, and I was certainly a part of it because of the frustrations that I felt after the last 2 home games. But to see them come out the way they did against Chicago, the second quarter was not their quarter. They gave up like 45 points. But the first quarter, I was impressed that they came out and looked locked in from the start, because that's something that they have been up and down about. And we'll see if they do it again tonight. But for the most part, they've been flat in first quarters, and that to me is a sign that with that particular starting lineup, one in which includes a player like Andrew Wiggins, who has kind of sleptwalked throughout the season, I was impressed to see them all unified and aligned to begin the game, because that has not happened a lot this year.
Yeah, there's one of two ways that could have gone last night. After what I think hitting rock bottom, they got booed.
Twice.
The Warriors got booed at home and loud. They won a title 2 years ago. This has been the model franchise for the last decade, and they're getting booed. And keep in mind, this ain't Philly. It ain't New York. We're out here on the West Coast, and they're booing the Golden State Warriors. So to me, that's as low as it gets. And so you can pack it in and just say, all right, let's just deal, guys, and mail this thing in because it's ugly, or you can respond with what it is they did last night. And I thought it was a character game. And I thought that the Golden State Warriors got off the mat and they showed that, if we put in effort, we can get back to winning basketball. I didn't have an issue with the second quarter. I know it was ridiculous. I think they put up 46 to the Bulls in that second quarter, and they had 75 at the half. I just didn't see it. I saw effort on the part of the Warriors last night. Even in that second quarter, I just think it was a Chicago Bull team. Like Kobe White was drunk. He was ridiculous. That was crazy. They just couldn't miss. And sometimes that'll happen. But I couldn't. I'd love to sit here and say it was another lack of effort, and nobody was switching, and there were guys that were just, you could see the lackadaisical effort. To be honest with you, I can't sit here on a live mic on 95.7 The Game and say I witnessed that in the second quarter. It was just, and you had that sense that they were going to stem this tide, and that things were going to shift if they continued to play this well in the third and fourth quarter. And sure enough, they continued to play, I think, the exact same sort of style of basketball in that second quarter throughout the rest of the game. It's just that Chicago came back down to earth in terms of making and or missing shots.
888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone with you here on Warriors This Week. We're taking you up until 12 o'clock. We're breaking down everything that's happened the last 7 days for the Golden State Warriors. Unfortunately, they do go 1-2. They are 2 games below 500, but they have a chance to draw closer today against a very good Milwaukee Bucks team later on this afternoon at 5 o'clock. How are you feeling about the last week? Does the taste that was left in your mouth last night in the 140-131 win against the Chicago Bulls just kind of sweep away all the things that we were discussing throughout the week about what this season might come to, what's necessary, the Shams Charania report about everyone being on the table for a trade except for Stephen Curry? Does all of that get wiped away? Do you want to see more? Do you want to see action? We want to hear from you at 888-957-9570 from the Comcast Business Text line 510. No defense because everyone is just jacking threes and no need for defense. Look, Chicago was taking a lot of threes, and they're not a particularly great three-point shooting team, but they do have guys that can get hot. I mean, it kind of reminded me, I think the Warriors are, because they have a lot of players that either are older or are lesser defenders than they used to be, they are reliant more on other teams missing shots more than ever. And in the second quarter, to your point, Dan, the Chicago Bulls just didn't miss shots. And Kobe White hit, I think, 4 of his 5 threes in the first half in that quarter. But what was frustrating for me is just a lack of contesting. And that was something we saw against both Toronto as well as New Orleans that kind of fell into the Chicago game. I mean, you don't score 131 points if a defense is locked in. I know that scoring is higher than it's ever been in the NBA. Players are more offensively driven than they've ever been in this league, it appears. But the Warriors... And it happened against New Orleans, too. They hit 5 threes in the first 4 minutes of the game. I know a couple of them were from Valanciunas and Herb Jones. But the Warriors I just don't think, capable right now with who they have on their team of being able to switch as quickly and get hands in faces while also maintaining an integrity in the paint. I think that's why they are in a position to where they are kind of hoping for missed shots at points, because they're making efforts without Draymond to try and not allow easy baskets at the rim, not allow teams to get downhill and attack the 10. And as a result, they're giving up more threes or more open threes. And then you're basically saying, okay, well, if Vucevic makes it, tip your cap. If Zach LaVine is shooting, the lights out, tip your cap. If Kobe White's hitting 4 threes in a quarter, tip your cap. But unfortunately, there are other good players in the NBA too. And so I think that's a result of some of the Warriors' I don't know about effort on defense, but certainly their mindset going in of we're trying to take away the easy baskets, and instead they're giving up a lot of threes.
I just need to see Draymond come back, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot easier to sort of accurately assess where the Warriors are at, especially what it is you just laid out when he comes back. If those holes are still there, if there's still vulnerability, like what it is that you just mentioned, whether it's closeouts or weak rotations, then there's an issue. I just really attribute this on the fact that your best defensive player is not there. And it's a trickle down. And when you don't have that guy, when he's on the floor, listen, there's one thing, love or hate this guy, you know when Draymond's on the floor. And that may not always be a good thing. But this guy's presence is something that, it's felt by everybody on that basketball team. And everybody plays differently. And that's why their record is significantly better when he's on the floor. And there's also a significant drop-off when he's not there. And I think that in order to accurately assess the Golden State Warriors going forward, I need to see what the new Draymond looks like, and with him coming back and how he works now with sort of what is a new look team. None of these youngsters were getting this sort of run when he was with the squad. He played with Trayce Jackson-Davis and Podziemski, but not to this extent. I mean, Podziemski was a starter for the most part during his absence, and Kuminga's now a starter. So there's sort of a new identity. I just need to see how Draymond sort of interacts with all of that before I could accurately sort of assess the team going forward.
So it sounds like you are excited to see Draymond and his return, which, by the way, could be as early as today. He was reinstated a week ago, and then it was reported by Woj that he would need a week to ramp up. So it could be today. We don't know yet, but of course we'll be keeping you abreast on that here on Warriors This Week. Like, if you had to rank 1 to 10 your level of excitement for Draymond coming back, what would it be?
Well, I don't know if it's excitement's the right word. I just think that they're a better team. I think if you're talking about what it means for him and impacting winning, I would say it's an 8. It's right around there. It's an 8 or a 9. I can tell you, I couldn't watch his press conference. I'm just so tired of it, man. I mean, it's as much as I think Draymond. I'm seeing this just clearly not as a Warrior fan because I'm not. I'm telling you straight up, objectively, how I perceive Draymond's return to this team. And I just, after Jordan Poole, we've seen so many of these, man. I'm a changed man. I've found whomever. And listen, if you really change, man, you don't, he had to do the press conference.
You don't have to tell people?
No, exactly. You know what's up. I mean, we'll find out, right? We'll find out in time. And I think he's going to keep his hands in his pockets, as they like to say, for the rest of the season. But, some will flare up. And we'll see where he's at. If it's the playoffs, if they get to the playoffs and somebody, cheap shots him and he's in the moment, we'll see where you're at with, But I do recognize his absence. And so I guess to answer your question, I put it, how about an 8.5? I'll go Dave Portnoy judging a pizza slice.
Give you a 3 for that. Out of 5, by the way. I think, look, for me, Draymond Green is, I'm with you. It's not excitement, but it is interest. Like, I'm interested to see how the Warriors look with him, because if they revert back to the team that's just kind of around 500, which they were with him. I mean, they're still blowing 20-point leads with him down in, and even again, like the game that I remember at the Los Angeles Clippers, who, by the way, are playing really good basketball. But at the time, Draymond had one of his throwback games. Like, he had 21 points. He was hitting threes. He was running out on the break, and they still blew a 22-point lead with him on the floor. So I think Draymond has been certainly a part of the problem as his actions are concerned, but he hasn't been the solution that he's been in the past. And so I'm curious to see if he can be now in an area in which he is ideally in a better headspace. I know you talked about what he said. I just want to play it for the people. This was Draymond Green earlier this week talking about how he wants to focus on changing the antics.
Let's face it, like, antics isn't something that got me here. And so when I look back on these situations, it's like, can you remove the antics? I'm very confident I can remove the antics. And I'm very confident if I do remove the antics, no one's worried about how I play the game of basketball. Nobody's worried about how I carry myself in the game of basketball, but it's the antics. So that's my focus. It's not on changing who I am completely. You don't change the spots on the leopard. It's just not going to happen. And I'm not going to try to set some unrealistic expectation of like, who's this person going to be? Like, it's not real, and that's not sustainable. I've always said before, I know how to be me a lot better than I can be anyone else. But in saying that, can I accept the fact that my antics has been over the top? Of course. Can I remove those? Am I capable of removing those? Of course. I think without that, then I don't think there's much of an issue. But it's the antics that can go, and I've made a commitment to do things to make sure that those don't creep in.
Are you buying it?
To a certain degree, but no, not in the long run. I think you are who you are at this point. And I know this might be counter to sort of popular belief. If there's going to be change, it's gradual. It happens over years. I hope he becomes a better guy, or whatever the antics are that's disallowing him from having a productive life, or however it is that we want to look at this. But he'll behave. But I think that, again, this isn't very unlike what we heard after Jordan Poole. Remember the press conference, which was pretty heartfelt?
Yeah.
A little stronger this time, but then, 6 months later, he's stomping on Sabonis. Now, I you know what? To me, to be honest with you, I don't have an issue with it. I don't. You can't get suspended. I get it. But if this lunatic, if that's what he needs to be Draymond Green, well, then, do you. Don't get suspended. But as far as his welfare as a human being, I don't stay up at night hoping that he's going to be a changed man and that, he's going to live in a healthy headspace. I'm worried about my own life. We're all trying to be better people, right? I hope Draymond becomes a better person, but it's not that's not the driving factor for me. I hope he becomes, a guy that comes back and can help this team just from a physical standpoint. The rest of the crap, that's between you and your therapist. It doesn't really concern me. Again, I'm trying to be a better person, as are you. We all got issues. So a lot of that to me is just overplayed. I just want to see him back on the court playing hoops again.
I do too, because I think what the Warriors missed since the last time we talked, and really up until last night, was fire, was passion, was energy. And that is, to your point, Dan, what Draymond Green brings in abundance. He also brings what he was talking about, the antics. And it's not the antics towards the referees. Like, Draymond Green is going to get teed up again. Like, it's going to happen. He might even get multiple texts. He might get ejected. But what you can't do is grab those flagrants.
Agreed.
Like, you cannot. The antics do not have to do just also with the players themselves. Like, for example, against Sacramento, and I think their largest blown lead of the season, 24 points. The turning point in that game was when Draymond was going at a referee and was talking about a carry and was going at him again and again and got teed up. The Sacramento Kings and their fans got back into the game. That changed the tone, the tenor of that basketball game. And sure, you shouldn't blow a 24-point lead just because of a technical. But that is something to where Draymond's antics allowed another team to get back into the basketball game. So it's not just the antics towards players. It's not just getting teed up by refs, but more situational awareness is what Draymond Green needs to have. And that's what I hope he found during his 3-week or however long hiatus, his 13-game hiatus. Because if he doesn't have that, if he hasn't found that, then I'm not sure what is going to change about the team. Like, I hope Draymond's changed. I hope he's a better man and he's grown and developed and acquired what he needs to from a mental standpoint to position himself to help this team. But if he can't do it on the court, if the team can't produce wins, well, then everything he just said in that 62-second bite that we're talking about doesn't really mean anything.
I think he laid it out, and this is the question going forward. Can he still be an effective basketball and live on that razor's edge and not do the antics part? Can he still be a high-energy guy? And because the one thing is that when he's getting in refs' faces and when he's getting teed up, and even the antics to a certain degree, he's dialed in. Like, he's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Can he still be an effective basketball player and not cross that line? I guess is the question going forward.
Yeah, I think we talked about that last week. That was one of my concerns is, okay, so if you're telling me he's thinking about dialing it back when he comes back, well, how does that affect how he plays defense or how he, gets up and down, because he does very much so provide something that the Warriors don't have, which is a chip. And if he's not playing with a chip, then who is he? I think he's smart enough to separate the two things. Like, I think he is smart enough to still be able to play with the fire and galvanize this team in the way that only he knows how. My question is, the further away you get from where we're at now, the further away you get from 2 days alone in your man cave and an introspective journey, the further you get away from that, how quickly do you fall back into the person that you were before? 888-957-9570 is the number. Dan Devone alongside Evan Giddings with you here on Warriors This Week. If you want to get in on the conversation about Draymond Green, what you expect from him when he comes back, if you're excited, if you're interested, if you really are indifferent, if you don't care at all, we want to hear from you at 888-957-9570. Also coming up next, I do want to get into how Draymond Green can impact two specific players, whether it's their playing time, whether it's their impact, whether it's their production. And we saw a little bit from these two guys, Kuminga and Wiggins, last night. Finally, some semblance of them being able to play consistently well throughout 48 minutes together on the court, separately by themselves. Is that what could be a reason that the Warriors turn the corner? We'll dig into that next as we continue here on Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you, taking your calls at 888-957-9570. We're back after this on 95.7 The Game.
When my daughter gets a cold, I have a secret weapon. Dayquil Kids Berry from Vicks. Dayquil Kids is specially formulated to treat kids' most bothersome cold and cough symptoms quickly. And the best part is that Dayquil Kids Berry tastes really great. Aren't you supposed to be resting? Maybe.
Dayquil Kids Berry. The kids' berrylicious daytime congestion, coughing, stuffy head, stuffy nose, just for kids.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
So this is why I love working with Dan Devone. I know we only get to do it about 3 hours a week. I wish it was more, but dude, you're always checking up on me, man. I appreciate it. It feels good to work with someone in which you're equally invested in each other. I mean, this guy's flying from New York back to the Bay. He's out in NY. He's got the entrepreneurship. He's doing the sports radio thing. He used to be on TV. And he just goes, hey, man, how's it going? How you doing? I appreciate that,
It's
Dan.
genuine, too. You know that, right?
I do. I really do. And I know that the genuine love for the Golden State Warriors has been up and down this season, but it feels like after last night's 140-131 win, there's a little bit of consistency here. They got to prove it again today against the Milwaukee Bucks. 5 o'clock tip. It'll be right here on 95.7 The Game. Mark Randy's going to have your Warriors Live and Warriors Wrap-Up for you, and Tim Roy will have the call as always. But we want to hear from you at 888-957-9570 is the number. Last week, the Warriors 1-2. Booed twice at home, and then they wrap up the week with maybe their best offensive performance in at least a couple of months against the Chicago Bulls. Klay Thompson goes for 36 and 6. Steph Curry ends up with 13 points in the fourth quarter, 25 points for the game. And also just looking up and down this box score, Dan, I mean, players absolutely contributed. 23s for the Warriors as a whole, but Jonathan Kuminga off the bench in 24 minutes, 24 points. He didn't miss a shot till like midway through the third quarter. And then even Andrew Wiggins in 30 minutes, 8 of 13, a +4, 17 points for him, and 8 assists. You brought this up earlier, Dan. The Warriors were moving the basketball last night, and that does scream Warriors basketball to me.
You could see that message heard, booing heard, rock bottom, yes, we were there, and that there was a concerted effort to play differently last night. And you could see the energy. You could see them getting out and trying to run. The ball movement was just so glaringly apparent to me last night. It was going side to side. Steph recognized early on that, his struggles were continuing, and he just facilitated throughout the majority of that first half. And it was a delight watching him hit open guys. And Klay as well. Klay and Trayce Jackson-Davis, I don't know where this came from, but suddenly they've developed this sort of connection with a pick and roll and finding him in the dunker spot. Everybody, and it's one of those things that when you see the ball moving, and they set the table, then it just filters down, and everybody else, gets into that mode. But I think the only time that the ball doesn't move is when they do sort of these ISOs for Jonathan Kuminga, which I'm fine with. Because Jonathan Kuminga is the one guy where you can see the mismatch, especially when he's got it going. They go ahead, back your dude down and take him in the torture chamber. Go to work. You can do that. But aside from that, that's Warriors basketball. And the fact that they made a committed effort not to turn the ball over, but you could clearly see, to me last night wasn't one of those that, Klay played well and Steph played well. It wasn't an individual stat sheet. Look how many points this guy had. Look how many points that guy had. But it was just that collective Warrior basketball and ball movement had returned, which meant that shot across the bow, the booing or whatever it is that motivated him, was clearly understood by that of the Warriors.
And I'm glad you brought up that connection between Klay Thompson and Trayce Jackson-Davis, because Klay has been a player that I think probably gets unfairly maligned just because he's kind of been the odd man out, and not the odd man out, but he's been up and down, especially since he's come back from injuries. And we talked about his comments post-game against New Orleans about how he doesn't care about getting booed. But last night, to me, against Chicago was a game in which that's why Klay Thompson's not going anywhere. Like, that's why he's not only at the deadline, it's a game you can look at and say that's probably why he's going to be back next year. If the Warriors and Klay Thompson can come to the right number, I think he has as much right as anyone to retire a Golden State Warrior. Because, and I know that might sound like an overreaction, but Klay, he has it in him to facilitate when he wants to get into that pick and roll game with TJD. That seems to be developing. He has the ability. He has the wherewithal to know when he's got it going and when he doesn't. And the issue with Klay Thompson has never been, that he's missing shots. It's that he takes bad shots on occasion. Last night, he definitely forced some, but he had it rolling. I don't know what about the United Center is his spot. I mean, he just loves playing in Chicago and draining threes in front of that crowd. But Clay was spectacular last night. 30 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He was moving the rock. He was hitting shots. And while Steph was largely struggling, especially in the first half, Klay Thompson was shouldering much of the offensive load along with Wiggins and Kuminga. So against Chicago, that showed you that the Warriors' wings do have productivity in them. It's not just now about extracting it on a consistent or a semi-consistent basis, because as great as last night was, it does make you feel like, well, where was that the last 2 games? It leaves you wondering where that is on a night in and night out basis, not just from Klay Thompson, but of course from Wiggins and Kuminga.
The wherewithal, that's everything. When you're talking about this team and especially their core, the aging core, and that's it. And I would throw Steph into this, under that heading as well. That's where they're at. And it's been it's been a really difficult sort of accepting and recognizing his quote-unquote new role, and I'm talking about Klay Thompson, to make the extra pass. The worst word in basketball as it relates to the Golden State Warriors are heat checks. That's just, to me, that's just selfish. That's just not reading the room. That's just living in your own world. What those 2 guys have to do, Ev, and it's not easy for an athlete, but if you want to be relevant and have sustainability and still be good, is that they have to recognize they are no longer in their 20s and it's no longer 2015 or 2016. You can still be a good basketball player, but those days that you just alluded to, the 14 threes at the United Center back in the day, that's not happening again. You're not that guy anymore, but you can still be a good basketball player. But your shots, they've got to be much more judicious. The extra passes, the player you were last night, coming to that, that aha moment where, yes, this is how I can be an effective player and still be on a winning basketball team. I'll give you a baseball analogy. AP Santangelo, good morning, wherever you are. Here's the thing. Think about aging pitchers and how they're able to stay in the league. I'll give you an example. Bartolo Colon just popped in my head.
Big sexy.
Bartolo Colon, when he first came up, I think he was with, I want to say, the California Angels. He was a Cy Young.
Cleveland right before. But you're right.
But he won his, that's right.
Yeah.
He won his Cy Young.
He won his Cy Young in L.A.
In L.A. And he was pure gas. He was like 99 on the corner, man. He would just rear back, and he would just throw it by you. The dude played into his 40s. I mean, he went to the Mets, and he was beloved by everybody, but everything was junk. Like, he stayed in the game because he learned how to throw off speed. Where am I going with this? As it relates to Steph and Klay, yes, you can still be good, but you're not 25 years old anymore. You can't come down and heat check and or dominate and think you're going to fill it up for 37 and a quarter. If you can come to that realization, look into the mirror and have that moment where you're saying, I'm still good, but I'm going to do it a different way, I think that's the crossroads where these 2 guys are at.
By the way, did you know that Bartolo Colon just got drafted in the new Saudi Arabian expansion baseball league?
Are you serious?
He was like the 6th or 7th overall pick. That dude's he's still playing baseball.
That is awesome knowledge,
I'm so glad you brought him up. I was thinking about him.
He's one of the true characters.
Dude,
man.
he is incredible. Yeah, he's a big boy. He still can pitch though. But I like the analogy. I like your point because this is great. This is another reason I love Dan.
That's funny.
This takes us off the rails. But bringing it back to the Splash Brothers, you hit on something that I think has kind of been swirling around my mind, and that's the concept of the heat check. Not that it needs to die completely, but last night, I don't think Klay Thompson took a lot of pure heat check threes. He took some tough shots, and he can make tough shots, but it wasn't like he determined, I'm sprinting down the court, and when I get the ball, it's going up. Those are the heat checks that hurt you, especially when, and this is really my reason for not enjoying the heat check 3 on this team. Because defensively, you can't afford wasted possessions. This isn't a team that right now without Draymond Green, and who knows, maybe even with Draymond Green, they're not a great defensive group. I think without Draymond, they're 28th or 29th in defensive rating. With him, they're middle of the pack. So they're significantly better, but they're not a great defensive team. That means turnovers, especially live ball turnovers, and then wasted offensive possessions really hurts you. One of the reasons the Bulls kind of made it a game towards the end there, the Warriors went up by 15 entering the fourth quarter, I think, or maybe it was 13, but then they kind of took some bad shots down the stretch. You could tell Steph was hunting for the dagger. He was trying to put them away, and then the Bulls got a couple leak outs, got some easy transition baskets. Boom, it's right back down to 6, and we're wondering, oh my gosh, is this going to happen again? Are they going to blow a late lead again? And fortunately, they were able to put the game away. Curry did his thing. Night to the Bulls. But in a season in which you do not have a great defensive unit, or at least you haven't found one yet, you can't afford turnovers and bad offensive possessions. And that, to me, is where the heat check can kind of get in your own way. Even though you have it going, you're rolling. I don't mind the contested shots because you can make tough ones. But the possessions in which you predetermine that you're jacking beforehand, no matter where the ball is coming to you from, those are the ones I would like to see them minimize.
Right on. That's exactly where I'm at with this team, and especially as it relates to those two. And you're right. I mean, because essentially when you shoot early in the clock, or when you shoot a contested, quote-unquote, heat check, and you clank that thing and it puts another team in transition, it's essentially a turnover, right? And I mean, I think that's the way a lot of coaches.
And their transition defense is not great either.
And yes, again, if you're a younger team and a younger player, that margin of error is not nearly where it's at right now. You cannot afford to do that with the Golden State Warriors the way they're currently constructed, which is primarily a team of guys, your best players, who are on the wrong side of 30. It doesn't mean that they're no longer any good. You just have to do it a different way. I couldn't agree with you more. The only time that I had some level of angst in that basketball game is when Steph Curry, and you could clearly see it, he had been struggling over the last month, and certainly over the last 2 games. And going into that contest, he wasn't very good for 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters. Mm-hmm. He hit a couple of threes, and you could almost sense it. And Dub Nation, you know where I'm at with this, that when Steph and Clay, and especially Steph, he hits a couple of threes, he immediately, it's almost as if he should tell the PA announcer just to scoot over. I got something to say. He's like, I'm back. Here I come. I got it. He gets the ball, and no one else, I kept an eye on this. No one else touched it. He dribbled the rock. He went one side to the other, looking for a crease, looking for an avenue, and he jacked up a 3 without getting anybody else involved. Zach LaVine came the other way, got a foul, went to the line, and that momentum was quelled just like that. And that's how quickly things can change when you lose, that momentum of what it is that you were doing and building that lead, and that's getting everybody involved. Take that 3 if it's there, but the ball movement, and it's so fine that you can just get outside of that realm of success. All it takes is 1 or 2 of those, and suddenly you're a different basketball team, and leads can change, as we have witnessed, in the matter of seconds. But thankfully, Steph did play well towards the end to able to sort of drive him across the finish line. But I think you and I are on the same page in the way you just eloquently laid out the heat check and how those guys can sometimes get lost in their own head.
And it is a delicate balance. Like, you obviously need Steph to be great. I think most nights for the Warriors to be in games, especially when you're missing Draymond and Chris Paul. Also, GP2, do have to mention, I think he's going to be reevaluated sometime next week for his injury that he's currently nursing. I know he's dealing with the calf strain earlier in the year. Now he's got a hamstring. Chris Paul, of course, has the fractured hand. He's reevaluated in a couple of weeks after just getting surgery out for 4 to 6. And then Draymond Green could be back as early as tonight. Really, it's up to Rick Celebrini and that medical staff to give Steve Kerr the green light and give Draymond Green the green light to get back onto the floor. But, the thing to me about the Splash Bros, because right now, like, the Warriors go as they go. And last night, 57 points combined, they're going to be in games when those guys shoot it well. So as much as I do agree, like, I think the heat checks need to be limited, and that's more about what they get hurt by on defense than how much they can produce offensively. But they need those guys to be great on a given night. And that's where I was excited to see the addition, or the role players, so to speak, the third and fourth options in Wiggins and Kuminga play as well as they did, because even if Curry and Klay scored 57, if they didn't get what they got from Kuminga and Wiggins, they wouldn't have won that basketball game. They wouldn't have scored 140 points, and they probably would have fell. So I think last night was a great team win, and it showed what they can do offensively as a group. But the bottom line is, if the Chef and Klay don't show up, they're not going to be in many basketball games, no matter how good Kuminga and Wiggins are. So it was positive to see that the offense was fantastic. But I'm kind of with the 605 here, and I'm worried because we're not going to score 140 every game. That's from the Comcast Business Text line. That was really the only difference last night. The problem is if we had played harder, we wouldn't be in that situation. But the team needs to play some clean D. I don't know if they're capable of playing, unbelievably shut down defense without Draymond Green. I'm not sure they can even play it with him at this point in his career. But you are looking at a team that is going to have to outshoot their opponents right now. And so that was the positive from last night, especially considering what they had given up against Toronto as well as New Orleans. I mean, they gave 133, 141, and then 131 last night. So defensively, they're all over the place. And offensively, I mean, look, the wings to me are the most important part of last night's game from a macro standpoint, because I think Wiggins and Kuminga have the best ability to create easy looks, especially Kuminga. Wiggins doesn't seem too intent on attacking the 10 as much as Kuminga does. But I do wonder if now Kerr is more inclined to play those two guys together. And I wonder if people want to see them together at 888-957-9570. Were you impressed by what you saw, the combination from both Andrew as well as Jonathan?
Yeah, and that's really sort of where we're at. Can those two guys, and it just makes sense. They're your two most prolific scorers. They're the two guys that can put pressure on the rim. They're probably your two best athletes right now. They should be on the floor together. But for whatever reason, it doesn't work. And it's been ugly. And statistically, Steve Kerr can show you the numbers to back that up. I thought Wiggins, and here we go. What do we do with Andrew Wiggins? Suddenly, hello, Andrew, where you been all year? And, he stands up and says, remember me? Does that, Ev, I'll put it back on you. And Dub Nation, where are you at? After watching what it is that he did last night with that bounce in his step, the crossover, the three, the rebounding, the defense, the two-way player, are you still, is everybody still in on pulling the trigger and moving him out of town?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And actually, I don't know if anyone else was thinking this last night. I don't dislike Andrew Wiggins. Each time I've had the chance to interact with him post-game, he seems like a nice guy. He's a cool dude, just chill, relaxed, introverted. Kind of like me, honestly, except for when I'm on the air with you. You bring the best out of me, Dan.
This is just a love affair.
But Wiggins to me last night, that was an audition. That was a chance to improve the trade stock a little bit. And I think he did, because he showed a flash. If I'm another team.
Wait, is he auditioning for another team?
Yeah, he's auditioning for another team.
Or is he not auditioning for Steve Kerr? Please don't trade me because I don't want to leave.
No. Well, he might be trying to, but I don't think it's going to work. I think he's auditioning for another team. And if you're the Warriors, not that you want to win games with him while he's still around, and you're still technically in an evaluation mood. I don't think there's a trade coming today. I don't think there's a trade coming maybe even this week, unless the rest of the road trip goes horribly wrong. I don't think the Warriors are going to make a move by the time they return to Chase Center on Friday against the Dallas Mavericks. But you do need Wiggins to play well, one, to win some games, two, I think to also give other teams a glimpse of what could be. Because I think a big reason that Wiggins hasn't played well this year is, yes, he's not as good, but I think he needs a change of scenery. And giving opposing teams a flash into what he can be if he's in the right frame of mind, I think is valuable. And so that's what I was left with last night. Obviously, I was impressed. He played well. I thought he was conducive to success. He played well alongside Kuminga, which hasn't happened a whole lot this season. But I think he might have helped his trade value and, in connection, helped the Warriors with a potential move to be made, because I still think they do have to make a move, and I think Wiggins is the guy that probably has to go.
I think it's interesting that maybe he was motivated by, he sees it's almost imminent that he's out the door if he was to read and listen to what's being said, not only here at 95.7 The Game, but across the country. Maybe he was just saying, hey, coach, I can still do this. Don't move me out of town. I think you touched on something that needs to be sort of elaborated, and that is it's so early, and you talked about how weird January is, right? Mm-hmm. I would also say, and just to add to that, it's even weirder this year because of the in-season tournament, that I think a lot of air left the room emotionally after that tournament, that the NBA just, we've never seen that before. And I think that there was, it's just been very odd. Of all of it, it's not just relegated to the Warriors, but everybody's getting blown out. And even the good teams, the Minnesotas, Sacramentos, the Oklahomas, they had rough stretches. And suddenly Utah spanking people. And I talked about Portland getting beat by 62 points. But I think if you just exert a little patience, and if, again, when it comes to Wiggins, if he strings together a couple of games like this, Draymond comes back, and you start winning again, it'll change just like that. I'll give a perfect example. Pascal Siakam is the guy that, just about every show we talk about him potentially coming to the Golden State Warriors. And if it's not the Warriors and we're doing a show in Toronto, well, he's going to get dealt somewhere, right? Well, that's been sort of, it hasn't been taken off the table, but since the trade, Toronto's been playing well. And Pascal Siakam's playing well with R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quigley, and Scotty Barnes is now the new centerpiece. And now suddenly you're not hearing as much chatter coming out of Toronto because they're rethinking it. Well, why don't we just give this a little time? Maybe we can re-sign him. Maybe he's part of the future. So I just use that as an example because as it relates to the Golden State Warriors, that when it comes to Andrew Wiggins, and I know everybody wants him out the door, but just let this breathe a little bit because the trade isn't going to happen tomorrow or next week. And if he learns, if suddenly he begins, the light goes on for him, Draymond Green comes back, you could see a complete new identity of this basketball team. So you don't want to make trades, Ev, just for the sake of making a trade. Just because you're getting booed and you hit rock bottom. You don't want to be doing that. You want to improve the team. So if you can improve, well, then go for it. But I also think that there should be some level of consideration of just letting this just sort of, everybody just take a deep breath and let's relax a little bit.
I agree with that. And I want to open up the phone lines at 888-957-9570. I see on the 650 Comcast Business text line. Remember when Wiggins had a post-up game? Remember when Wiggins had a pull-up jumper? Well, we saw both last night in Chicago. The question is, can he do it tonight in Milwaukee? All right, D's in D.C. What's up, D? Start us off for your Warriors this week. You're on with Evan and Dan. How you doing?
Evan and Dan DeVoe. This is your favorite coconut, man. This is your favorite coconut. Listen,
you don't think I know that?
Look, my Saturday is not a Saturday without listening to you guys. But hey, Dan, why is it that you're not on the radio on the weekdays, man?
I got
this
stuff
guy's got
going
17
on,
different gigs, D. I mean, he's busy.
They can't afford me, D.
Oh, man, I miss you, man. I really do. Evan, you're doing a hell of a job, man.
Nice, D.
You especially you filling up for what's his name?
Yeah, Steiny.
Steiny. You did a wonderful job this week, man. Anyway, I just want to address the defense thing, man. Look, first of all, I called yesterday and I told you guys, defense starts with the coach. You, Evan, you came back and said, no, it starts with the players. You can have the best players in the world. If you do not have a proper scheme to fit those players, your defense is terrible. It's not going to be good at all. Yeah, you might have individual players like GP2 who's going to pick up the ball handler from 90 feet. But beyond that, if you do not have the scheme, the proper scheme for all five players that are on the court to actually perform, it's not going to work. It's not going to be there. It's not going to be there throughout the game. Now, Kerr, I like Kerr, but he does not know defense. There's no one on the staff right now who knows defense. He needs to invest on someone to bring in a defensive coordinator to help him out. Until that, man, this team is not going to go anywhere, man. Especially now with Steph and Clay struggling to shoot the ball and having a Looney on the floor who's really a net negative. You guys can talk about Wiggins all you want, but Looney is the worst center this year.
Thanks, D. No, point taken. Look, I agree with you, D, that defensively the Warriors have not been up to par. I mean, right now I'm looking at a team that's 24th overall in defensive rating. They've been 28th when Draymond Green has not been on the floor. So I'm sure coaching could certainly help a little bit of that. And I do want to take that and expand upon it on the other side. I also see you, Kurt in Oakland. Please hang on. I want to get to your call on the other side as well. 888-957-9570 is the number. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone with you here on Warriors This Week, taking your calls, taking your questions, whether it's on the Comcast Business Text Line, YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union. I want to expand upon what D asked about the coaching scheme, the players, and what the Warriors might be able to do to improve defensively, especially against the Milwaukee Bucks team right now that's coming in averaging over 120 points a game this season. We're back after this on 95.7 The Game with your calls next. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings, Warriors This Week.
Adam, it's too much for me.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer that'll help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200.
Warriors This Week continues on 95.7 The Game.
All right, 1 hour in, 2 to go. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you here on 95.7 The Game. This is Warriors This Week, and we got a lot going on in sports this weekend, Dan. We're just discussing the NFL playoffs. It looks like there's a game that's going to be moved tomorrow in Buffalo to Monday. The Warriors are up in Milwaukee right now, taking on the Bucks tonight at 5 o'clock on NBA TV. We got college hoops. And, of course, we got, according to Kurt in Oakland, a discussion to have about Andrew Wiggins. Kick us off, Kurt. What's going on? You're on Warriors This Week with Evan and Dan. How are you?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. Wiggins is finally starting to step up a little, it looks like. I would love for him to be traded, but if he stays, it's not the end of the world, but they do need to make a move. My suggestion, if possible, would somehow get him to Utah for Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, because that would take care of the Warriors' lack of size because they're both 7-footers. And Kessler is a defensive-minded big, which then would help everybody else because he's more willing to do the dirty work. And, as we know with defense, you can have all the great coaches you want, but if the player doesn't want to play defense, he's not going to play defense. And, players aren't going to do the dirty work unless they want to do the dirty work. And people don't seem to understand that. You have to want to play defense. You have to want to die for the ball. But people don't want to because they're more worried about scoring, which is the way it goes nowadays. But I just feel like somehow getting him over there and getting those two back, which is still a long shot, would be awesome. And then the other long shot, which sadly Indiana is playing good now, would be Miles Turner, who was once a defensive stopper. And maybe he'll light fire and want to play defense again. But those are really the only two that pop into my head about the bigs.
I mean, I would love either Lauri Markkanen or Walker Kessler, Dan, but I'm not sure someone like Andrew Wiggins is going to get you either of those guys.
Well, that's just it. Is that when it comes to the Warriors making a trade, which is why I think that status quo and staying pat might be as unpopular as this might sound, and this isn't all off of last night's feel-good victory, but it might just be the best course of action going forward because I just don't know what it is that you're going to get in return for Andrew Wiggins right now. The question just becomes, are you willing to move off of the kids? Are you willing to move off of Jonathan Kuminga? Because you're not just moving Andrew Wiggins to get somebody like that at Lauri Markkanen. Maybe you can move him straight up to get Walker Kessler. But I don't know if the Warriors are willing to do that. By the way, Kessler is another guy, not to dust off Bob Myers, but, you went peanut butter and jelly, Patrick Baldwin Jr.
Oh, that's true.
And there was Kessler sitting in that 2022 draft. So the list goes on. But I think that when it comes to trading, I know the Warriors want to make a trade. The question becomes for who and who are you giving up? And let's just be honest here. If you're talking about Wiggins straight up for somebody like that of a Lauri Markkanen, that's just not going to happen, especially with Danny Ainge in the room. Danny Ainge is going to look to take you to the cleaners. Yeah, that's what he does. Look what he did too, and it's worked out, certainly, for that of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I was
going to say, he got four first-round picks for Gobert.
And, he doesn't play. So I think if you want in the conversation of Lauri Markkanen, you're going to be giving up a lot. And so I think the best I've maintained this, that I think you got to see what you have with Draymond coming back. And I'm probably, if I had to pick one way or the other, I'm leaning towards just keeping with what it is that you have because your options are so limited.
And you mean Wiggins, right?
Keeping Wiggins, yes. Keeping the team as is with Draymond Green coming back, seeing how all of this sort of unfolds with him, the youngsters, and hopefully in Andrew Wiggins, who finally found himself.
Well, I think that's the most likely path in the immediate. They get Draymond back into the fold. He could return as early as today. We're not sure. We'll keep you up to date in case that happens. But looking ahead on the road trip, you got obviously a game on Monday on MLK Day at 3:00 against Memphis. And then speaking of the Utah Jazz, you play them on Wednesday. So you're going to see, I think, they have like 6 guys 6'10" or above. Like, you're talking about a team with size, not just Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, Kelly Olynyk, John Collins, or maybe it's 6'9", but either way, like, they got a ton of size on that Utah Jazz team. We're going to see them on Wednesday. To me, if there was a guy that the Jazz would want to get off of, I think it would be John Collins, just because he has a few years left on his deal. I don't think he necessarily fits into what they have in mind for their immediate future. But if you're dealing with Danny Ainge, you're going to have to come off of picks. Like, that's what that guy wants. And that is something that I would not be willing to move if I'm the Golden State Warriors, because you already don't have your first-round pick this year. Well, it's top 4 protected. It's in Portland right now. And then you can only trade, I think it's your 2026 and your 2028 picks. I don't know what the Warriors are going to be in 2 years. I don't know what the Warriors certainly are going to be in 4 years. But all I know is I want those first-rounders because, and Mike Dunleavy has already shown you, he can turn a first-round pick and even a second-round pick into a serviceable rotational player. I know Podziemski's hit kind of a rookie wall as of late, but he has been, I think, a nice piece for the Warriors this season. The fact that he's already starting in his rookie year may be a reflection of the roster, yes, but it's also a reflection of his productivity. And then Trayce Jackson-Davis is emerging as a pick-and-roll partner for Curry for when CP3 when he was out there, and then last night for Klay Thompson. He's also a rim protector, and he could be a guy that could one day supplant, and maybe in the near future, supplant Kevon Looney. So, I think right now the picks are valuable to the Warriors. I would disagree about Wiggins. And again, this is not about me I don't think he's terrible, but I just think that he's a guy for Golden State is problematic for a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't know what you're going to get from him on a given night. 2, when Draymond comes back, I don't want Steve Kerr to have the allure of Wiggins because that might step in the way of Kuminga's development. And right now, I want to see more of JK. Now, 24 minutes and he had 24 points last night. He was really good. I know that I don't think he's a player that should be getting 35 minutes a night. But to me, I do think the Warriors need to see and implement more of him on a consistent basis. And I think Wiggins, just because of his position and also the way that he plays, is kind of in Kuminga's way when Draymond Green eventually returns. Because Kerr's talked about Kuminga playing more of the 4. That, to me, demands Draymond to kind of slide over to the small ball 5. And if Wiggins is out there, I'm just not sure how it fits. What I'm interested also to see when Draymond Green returns is if he can be the glue to those two guys in a combination in the lineup, because last night they played well together. I mean, they were solid, but over the course of the season, a large sample size would tell you that they have not been able to play well together for long stretches. I wonder if Draymond Green can change that. If he can change that, Dan, I'd be more inclined to come around to your way of thinking of maybe letting this thing play out, maybe see what you have. But for right now, I haven't seen enough yet to make me come off of my choice of wanting to move Wiggins.
Yeah, they played well last night, and Dario Saric, I think, sort of worked well with those players. It was interesting that, and I'm with you, Jonathan Kuminga going forward has to get his minutes, right? He has to be, whether he's starting or first guy off the bench, he's in the rotation, and he's getting his significant minutes. And I don't think that Andrew Wiggins can cut into that. Now, ideally, you'd like to see both of those players on the floor at the same time, like that of last night. By the way, really quick on Jonathan Kuminga, he didn't start last night.
No, yeah, he came off the bench because Wiggins started. Exactly.
And I think that it was interesting that Steve Kerr, after everything that went down in the last 2 games, decided to go with the veterans. I'm not sure what the statement was there, but I think it was clear that I think Kerr, after tinkering with that lineup and starting Kuminga and starting Podziemski, was like, you know what? If we're going to go out, I'm going to go out with the veterans. And this team is best suited when I have my veterans and when Klay and Steph are shooting it and playing well, like we alluded to earlier, not just heat checking it, but playing within that system and the ball's moving. And then it makes sense when you start moving in some of the younger pieces, bring in Trayce Jackson, Podziemski gets into the rotation, then it begins to look as though you have more of a clear identity. But just getting back to Kuminga for a second, we talk about, and we're always sort of keeping an eye on his growth and his maturity. How about that? The guy, after starting and playing well, and again, after getting blown out in the last 2 games, he sits, but yet he comes into the game and had the right attitude. Like, he came into that game and he was ready. That was, I'd argue, his best game as a pro. I mean, the guy was perfect until the closing moments of the contest. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes a long way of, again, as we continue to put him under the microscope as far as his maturity, and the guy's grown up in front of our very eyes, I think he took a huge step last night because there was a perfect recipe for him to pout and or mail it in because, again, of what he might have perceived as the disrespect of not starting. But it was just the complete opposite. One of the reasons why I think that you have to give a longer leash to Andrew Wiggins is because he's one of the few guys, if not the only guy, that hits that sweet spot for the Golden State Warriors, meaning he's still in his prime. He's not in his mid-30s or over 30 like the majority of the team, or he's not too young like a good portion of the team, the Jonathan Kumingas, or more specifically the Trace Jackson Davises and the Brandon Podziemskis, but rather the guy is in his late 20s, and when you see what it is that he did last night, the tease is so strong that I'm like, really? The one guy you got on your team that, along with Kevon Looney, that's in that 28 to 29, in that age category where he still hasn't even peaked, and we're ready to move off of him after what it is that he did last night. I'm willing to side I'm willing to have a little bit more patience than maybe the average Warrior fan at this juncture.
I mean, we've been patient for
that's true.
38 games. I mean, and this is kind of a larger point about Wiggins. Like, you use the word tease. Andrew Wiggins has been a tease his whole career. Like, he's been a tease of potential, a tease of a guy that has number one athletic ability with number two like production at times, but has a number three mindset. Like, he is so hard to pin down on what you're going to get from him that to me is like, I don't think they can get a whole lot from him or for him because of his contract. And that's part of it too. I don't want to do this dance with Wiggins for 3 more years. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to do the dance of, well, is he in the right mind place? Could he miss 2 months because he's got stuff going on at the house, which is absolutely his prerogative, and that was granted to him by the Golden State Warriors. We don't know if he's going to come in and he's going to be the starter for the next couple of years. Is he going to be in Kuminga's way? Is he going to be the two-way Wiggs that we saw in the finals? I don't want to do that dance because the Warriors already have so many more questions in addition to him about what they're getting on a given night, the combinations that Kerr sometimes uses, sometimes the combinations he goes away from. And to me, he throws more ingredients into an already kind of boiling and not a little bit stinky gumbo pot at times for the Warriors. Like, he's just an ingredient that I would want to remove and remove the distraction for Steve Kerr. I think he's a way to shrink the rotation. I think he's a way to get Kuminga more involved. And I think he's a way to move forward and begin a transition that is inevitably going to happen. And that, to me, does demand, like, if you're talking about goals for the Warriors moving into next season, I am not a fan of having multiple long-term, not albatross contracts, but large contracts. Like, Kuminga's taken up 15, 20% of the cap currently. That only increases his next 3 seasons. Draymond Green is already under contract for 3 more years. I think the Warriors are more inclined because of their, obviously, history with him and their allegiance to him to maybe have him around for long-term. I don't want both of those 4 years, including this season, around heading into next season because I just think it bogs them down so much. It keeps them a little bit in the past. And what we've seen over the last year and a half is they're still hanging on to that championship. And I think it's one of the reasons why they're 18-20 right now.
That's a good point. I think Andrew Wiggins is, he's this enigma. I can't argue with that because he clearly wasn't the number one when he came out. Remember, drafted by Cleveland, dealt to Minnesota, and Minnesota said, okay, take us to the promised land. Here are the keys. We're going to build around you. Wasn't comfortable as being a number one. And so the thinking was immediately when he came to the Warriors, this is a perfect fit because he doesn't have the personality to be center stage. That's all right. You got Steph and you have Clay, and this is, before Clay was hurt. And so, it all sort of made sense. And then it seemed as though he settled in comfortably as that number 2. And you can't argue the guy's scoring around 19 or 20 on his career. And at one point when the Warriors, 2 years ago, and throughout stretches when he was on the floor last year, he was the number 2. He was number 2 to that of Steph Curry. And clearly you could see that the Warriors had more of a balanced scoring sheet because it was Steph, and then you would get these solid minutes from from Andrew Wiggins. What I didn't foresee is what happened, last year, the personal checking out of the season, and then this year's disappearance. So when you're assessing the future with Andrew Wiggins, you're right. You have to take all that into account. He's sort of an introvert to begin with, and he can disappear at times, even when he's not hurt or not, taking care of family business. Even when he's on the floor, there were lapses for 2 weeks where he just simply would crawl into this hole and lacked emotion and got really lethargic. And so he is the constant tease, because there are nights like last night, but then will he crawl back into that hole? And I can see where it is that you and maybe other players and maybe, the powers that be with the Golden State Warriors are saying, enough of this, enough of, what Wiggins are we going to get tonight? But again, is what it is that he did against Chicago, is there enough, and because of the fact that he's 28, 29 years of age, is that enough for you to keep him, I guess is the question, and or if you deal him, could this guy, hit another plateau where he's that consistent player as he gets into his 30s, I think is the big question going forward.
Yeah, and look, I know he's 28. This is 10th year in the league. So you start to look at players that got minutes and miles on their legs. I'm not so sure he's not on the back end of his career. I mean, he's played a lot of basketball, and he started at a young age. And it's tough, right? I mean, Wiggins played a great game last night. He might have played his best game of the season. He had 17 points. Most importantly, he had 8 assists. We saw him being willing to move the rock, make the extra pass. There was a play, I think it was in the first or second quarter, where Wiggins backs down a bull on the block, collapses the defense, and swings it over to the corner for an open three. Like, that to me is the Wiggins that we saw during the playoff run in 2022. That's the Wiggins that has his heads up, that is willing to make the extra pass, that doesn't just want to get his shot, a fadeaway 16-footer, which he can hit, but is a low percentage look. I thought Wiggins last night was in a good flow of trying to find where he could get his, but also how he could create for others. He also had 5 rebounds, 3 of them offensive. He was clearly working last night, but that doesn't happen enough for me. Just like the Warriors scoring 140 points, I don't think is sustainable. That's why we're talking off the top. If you learned something from the last week, yes, the Warriors have the ability to fill it up in a big way. They also, in their last 3 games, have given up 76, 73, and 75 in the first halves against Toronto, New Orleans, and Chicago. That, to me, is an issue defensively. I hope Draymond Green can come in and help, but you had Wiggins on the floor for all 3 of those games. You even had Jonathan Kuminga on the floor for all 3 of those games. People have been talking about how if the Warriors are to be at their best defensively, and I was on board with this for a while, it does include Kuminga and Wiggins playing well together. From what I've seen for the totality of the season thus far, and they're 38 games in, I understand we got a lot of basketball left. I haven't seen enough for me to believe that they can all of a sudden turn it on. And if people think that they can, I do want to hear from you at 888-957-9570. That's Dan Devone. My name is Evan Giddings here on Warriors This Week. Let's get out to Bobby in Oakland, who I think is more with you, Dan. What's up, Bobby? You're on 95.7 The Game. How are you?
Hey, good. Good to be on. You guys are doing a great job. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Dan, you brought it up, and I had this feeling. I know all the arguments for trading Wiggins, but I heard the other day or not too long ago that he was upset about the way he's playing. So, he has a pulse there. There's something going on. And we know what he did 2 years ago, and we know what he did for the last year and a half, right? You take last night's game, you can trade this guy. Who are you going to get, Buddy Hield? I don't want Buddy Hield for Indiana. I mean, no one's going to do the Warriors favor by bringing us Markkanen or some of these names at Siakam without really taking us to the cleaners, right? So you can actually do worse as a team by trading Wiggins. I would say just let this thing play out, do something over the summer. You may have to maybe come down to moving veterans, but young wings like that, him, Kuminga, Woody, you don't give up on those guys. And I know the situation, but hang on to Wiggins, let this thing play out, and I don't think we can make a move that's going to get us into the playoffs anyway without internally some coaching and players look in the mirror and just turning it on. Maybe when Draymond come back, we'll get better. But that's all I wanted to say. Let's keep Wiggins and let this thing roll out.
I like it, Ev. There's not a lot of callers like that, and maybe it's because, again, we're sort of in that feel-good after the win last night. But I maintain this, throughout the week, that your best option is to hang on to people because you're not bringing anybody else in return, I don't think. And if you are, then you're not just getting rid of Wiggins. Wiggins is part of a package, and that package is going to include Kuminga. Most likely, if you're going to get a serious upgrade, and it's most likely going to involve, draft picks. So the idea, let's get rid of Wiggins. Yeah, if it's a 1-for-1, maybe you can consider it, but I don't think what's Wiggins by himself or even Chris Paul going to bring you back that's going to be a significant upgrade. The other thing I would what everybody has to remember, and again, to the caller's point, is that there's precedence here. Now, listen, I know that the Warriors are typically front runners, all right? You're not going to win 73 games this year. Sorry to spoil the plot, Warrior fans. You're not going to run away and hide from people like you had in the past when you won championships, but there's precedence here, and you don't have to look any further than last year with the Lakers. At this time a year ago, a sub-500 team got to the trade deadline, and they turned their entire season around, went to the Western Conference Finals.
I need to do the same thing this year.
Yeah, they're bad, right? 2 years ago, the Boston Celtics were a sub-500 team right around this point, right?
Yeah, they're 20-21 on January 10th. Or, sorry, on February 10th.
And they obviously, went to the NBA Finals and eventually lost to the Golden State Warriors. So my point in all of this is that as bad as it is, that when you look at the Golden State Warriors and this idea that it's the end of the season and then there's no hope, there's so many moving pieces that the best card to play right now might be just hanging on to what it is that you have because you don't know what it's going to look like with Draymond Green and with these youngsters playing with Draymond Green and then holding out hope that Andrew Wiggins becomes that guy of 2 years ago. And last night, if it's any sort of an indicator, I think takes a step in the direction of what it is that I'm saying and supporting keeping this cast and not making that drastic trade because it's not going to improve your team.
This is from the 415 in the Comcast Business text line. Wiggins doesn't want to be on the team anymore. His contract might make it difficult to trade him, however. Greg from SF, appreciate you chiming in. On YouTube, seeing Andis Brown, when Dunleavy calls the GM about Wiggins, the first question every GM will ask is Kuminga included? If no, immediate hang-up. That's the tough part about moving Wiggins is you're in a position to where you might have to bite the bullet and attach something to send him out. So, to me, Dan, that is worth it. But I also don't think you have to do it now. I'm with you that we need to wait and let this thing play out a little bit longer because you have to see if Draymond Green can help this thing. But I'm still at the point where I view Wiggins as a player that's in the way of Kuminga. And they might play slightly different positions. Kuminga's more of a 4, Wiggins is certainly more of a 3. But to me, if Draymond and Wiggins are both out there, if they're both starting, that does mean less time for JK. And I know JK is not going to be great all the time. I mean, I know he got the DMP down the stretch we were talking about last week against Denver, followed it up with 11 points in 36 minutes the next night against Detroit. He was kind of up and down this week. I think before last night, he made 4 of 4 3-pointers, but he was 3 of 21 from 3 heading into that game. So, he's been inconsistent, yes, but if I'm looking at pieces that I want around long-term that I think can help the Warriors retool and get back into legit championship contention, I think Wiggins is the guy that I would feel comfortable moving. And I am willing to attach a potential pick to do that. I don't think it brings back a big boy. You're not getting Siakam for Wiggins in a first-rounder, even if you include Moody. It's got to be – Kuminga is the best way to upgrade from the trade perspective. But, and we'll continue this on the other side, I do want to know if fans think there's a needle to be threaded at the deadline that improves you for this year, that sets you up for next season, but also doesn't force you to give up too much, because I have an idea on the other side that I'll reveal. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone with you here on 95.7 The Game. 888-957-9570 is the number I see on the YouTube chat, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. We're back after this on 95.7 The Game.
I bet you folks are glad to be done with your shopping. Hopefully, all your gifts went well. But there's one last store to visit, this time just for yourself. Your chance to get one of the top-rated Samsung.
It's not that they're over the hill, but these guys are no longer spring chickens and certainly not in their 20s. And then the other half of that equation is the other part of the roster, which is too young. The Brandon Podziemskis, the Trace Jackson Davis, who I have complete faith in, and there's a high level of excitement by all Warrior fans, as well there should be. But they're not there yet. So who is the one guy or the few guys on that roster that you can say is in their prime and ready to play their best basketball? Well, it's Andrew Wiggins and it's Kevon Looney that hit that sweet spot of being 28, 29 years of age, respectively. I think that bodes well. And I think that what it is that he did last night, that I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I know that's counter to sort of popular belief, but when you see that, it just, in that style of play and working within the fabric of the way the Warriors were playing, again, just to reiterate, with that ball movement, and it wasn't so much about Wiggins, it wasn't so much about Steph and Clay and Kuminga, who all played well. It was just collectively how you could clearly see that the Warriors made a concerted effort to move the basketball and play with energy. And that fit right into the way Andrew Wiggins, his most effective style of play, when he's downhill and he's in transition. And the same thing with Jonathan Kuminga. You know, that there has to be, and I guess this is where we're at, Ev. How do those two coexist? Because Steve Kerr will tell you, I cannot lose games. I can't afford to try and make it work with these two on the floor at the same time. I can't afford experimentation at the expense of losing games. But how do you get these guys on the floor so, to your point, that Jonathan Kuminga gets run, Andrew Wiggins is Andrew Wiggins, you slide in, maybe Draymond Green in between those two, and the Warriors continue to be a good basketball team. Is that in the cards?
Well, they were a good basketball team offensively last night. They were a great offensive basketball team last night. 39 assists to 5 turnovers. That is tied for a franchise low. They moved the rock with consistency. They didn't turn over the ball, and it was a big reason why they were able to overcome a Chicago team that shot 58% from the floor and 45% from three. Let's get back to the phone lines. 888-957-9570. And it doesn't sound like you're in the minority, Dan, because we got one of our favorites on the line. Tim in North Carolina wants to take your side when it comes to Andrew Wiggins. What's up, Tim? Hope you're well on the East Coast. Welcome to Warriors this week.
Well, what's going on, guys? Yeah, Dan, I agree with you, man. I think if y'all look back at some of the highlights, go back to Kuminga's rookie year, go to the playoffs in Kuminga's rookie year. They started those guys, Wiggins, Kuminga, with Draymond in a few games. Draymond is the key to that success for that lineup. He's the other ball handler. And you guys will see Draymond will get that ball on the pick and roll, top of the key, heading downhill, and he's throwing the lob to Kuminga or Wiggins all the time. I think what we're forgetting is that Draymond just hasn't been around, and so that lineup hasn't played with him. But I'm like you, Devon. Listen to what y'all just said about the Lakers. Yeah, they broke it up. They did all of that last year, and they're about to have to do the same thing again this year. Like, when you start shipping all those young guys out, and having a patchwork teams, you're basically stuck doing that year after year after year. And I guarantee you, as the Lakers is just not going to do that. I'm more inclined just let the thing play out. Let Draymond be a part of this thing the next 10, 15 games. I mean, for the rest of the season. And let's just let it play out. I mean, we got to stop feeling that we just entitled to win a title every single year. The problem that we're in this problem in the first place is because we thought that last year, when last year was the year to integrate the young guys and just bite the bullet and keep it going. You know, you listen to what Mike Malone said the other night with those young guys playing on his team. What did he tell TNT? I got to be patient with my young guys. He's a defending champion, and he's biting the bullet to be patient. We didn't do that. And, Evan, I heard you say the other day on the radio that last year the young guys was the reason we were losing a lot of those games. Evan, that's not the case last year. A lot of those games lost last year when we were putting Kuminga and Wiseman and those guys out there was because we weren't integrating them with the big boys. And then the big boys was choking those games away in the end against Orlando and Charlotte and Detroit. And then we panicked and just took them out of it and went to the Ty Jeromes and Lambs. And that was the year for the big boys and Kerr to integrate these young guys and just bite the bullet. But we feel we entitled to win a title every single year, and that's unrealistic. Sometimes you got to reload. And last year was the year to reload, bite the bullet, and now we're stuck But, yeah, you don't give up on these guys. You're going to become the Lakers every single year trade deadline, have no identity to the team. And who wants to be a fan of something like that? You know, I'd much rather just see this thing play out. I would like to be a fan of Kuminga and Moody long term and see him grow. You know what I mean? So, no, Dan, I'm with you, man. I think that the key to that lineup is Draymond. Go back, look at highlights, guys. Look at Kuminga highlights on YouTube, like 10-minute montage, and look at Wiggins on the court with him at all times with Draymond on the floor as well. Go back and look at his rookie year when they started against the Memphis series and different series. Draymond was on the court with him. He's the second ball handler. So I think we just kind of overblowing this thing. Draymond is going to be the key. He's going to be the link to some success with that thing. And if not, then we just play it out. It just wasn't our year. But don't start becoming a patchwork team that every year, every trade deadline, you trying to bring in more and more, because that's not really fun to cheer for.
Thanks, Tim. Like, I mean, I'm not talking about an overhaul of the roster. I mean, I think it just is one player. Like, my goal for the deadline for the Warriors would be addition by subtraction, because one of the overarching themes of this year is you got 12 playable players. But for much of it, you don't really know on a given night who's going to be your 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I know injuries haven't helped that, because now Paul's out and Draymond's been suspended. GP2's been out. But when those guys come back and when they're healthy, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later, you're going to be stuck with those same problems again. Kerr's going to have to choose who's out of the rotation. And that might not be the guy that you want it to be. I think Kerr gave some rope at the beginning of last year, mainly to James Wiseman. Tim was talking about how they didn't win with young guys. They didn't win with anyone last year. Like, at the beginning of the year, they didn't win at all on the road. So, you know, they moved off of Wiseman. I think they still should stick with Kuminga. And again, the biggest reason that I would trade Andrew Wiggins is because I do view him as kind of a stopping, an obstacle for Kuminga right now. And that's who I would try to prioritize if we're talking about giving young guys rope.
I think any sort of trade before the arrival of Draymond Green back to this basketball team is premature. I just think it's jumping the gun. You don't really know what this team's identity is or how all of these things fall into place with who I think is your centerpiece in a lot of ways. Now, I know Steph is your best player, but your second best player, at least in my estimation, is Draymond Green. Going back to what I said off the top, when Steve Kerr, and just to echo what it is that he said in the 3 words, we're missing spirit, and this is when they got blown out in back-to-back games at home. We're missing spirit, confidence, and belief. Well, I'll just ask you out there, Dub Nation, and the rest of the listeners, who does that sound like? Who is it that he's describing? Who has spirit, confidence, belief? I'll throw energy in there. I'll throw technicals. I'll throw emotion. I'll throw all of that. That is Draymond Green. And so if you're going to properly assess who the Golden State Warriors are and what it is that they're missing and what is it they do well, I think you need that centerpiece, especially defensively, on the floor to make that an accurate assumption.
I agree, and it's why I'm not calling for a trade now, but I think by the time we get to the deadline, and I don't mean to make it sound like I'm pessimistic, but I think Draymond's going to come back and help. I don't see how he can't help. Especially, like, defensively, they've been terrible. I mean, again, they've given in the last 3 games, they've given up 133, 141, and 133 points. That is, by even modern day NBA metrics or standards, that's a lot. Like, they can't stop anybody right now. They won last night because they outshot the Bulls. A Bulls team, by the way, that's now 4 games below 500. But that was an encouraging win from the standpoint that you needed it after getting blown out in back-to-back games at home. I don't know if Draymond Green can come in and all of a sudden just galvanize this group on the defensive end the way that he used to be able to. I also don't know if he can be the glue for Wiggins and Kuminga. And I'll give them this. Like, they were solid last night, but they look so good to me. One, well, Kuminga didn't miss a shot. Wiggins looked engaged. The team as a whole looked engaged. There was effort, which was not there the last 2 home games. But also, if you look at the combination of Wiggins and Kuminga, so they played, I think they're like a minus 84 in 25 minutes that they've been on the floor together prior to last night. They played a 7-minute stretch, and they're a +1. That's better, certainly, than minus 84. that doesn't mean that all of a sudden they are right. Like, they were serviceable last night. They were good enough to be a positive, barely. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden this team is going to turn on its head because they suddenly found something. Tonight against Milwaukee, it's a tough back-to-back. You're on the road. Like, you get blown out tonight, and are we back to square one? Like, I don't know. I'm looking at the entire week since the last time that we spoke, Dan, and the issues defensively, neither Kuminga nor Wiggins have been able to right that wrong. Like, they've been great offensively, or they were great offensively last night. That's, to me, is where I was very encouraged by what they did on the offensive side. But defensively, if you're asking those two guys, who ideally, in a perfect world, should be your best two-way players, being able to stop point of attack on the defensive side, be able to get hands in the passing lane, get out in transition and run, I haven't seen that yet. And that is something that I hope Draymond can help. I don't know if he's all of a sudden just going to be the magic potion that turns them back from pumpkins. I don't know.
We'll take some calls.
Let's do it. Let's get out to Magic in Dallas. What's up, Magic? You're on Warriors This Week here with Evan and Dan Devone.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? I just wanted to call in because I think obviously last night was somewhat encouraging to the fact that Wiggins was playing well, but really for me, I just hope that he continues to play well on this road trip and when they get back home so that he can boost his value even more so that they can trade him. Like, there's no chance with the Warriors defense right now that they're going to be able to win a championship this year. They have aging guys. Steph is too relied upon. So, in my opinion, I feel like they need to, maybe people wouldn't like me for it, but I think they need to trade, maybe not Clay, but certainly Wiggins and Draymond and keep the young guys like Kuminga and them in order to bring in, even if it's more of a salary dump at this point, because you're not winning this year whether you make a splash trade or not. Like, even if they were able to get Siakam, for example, he's not going to make this team go over the top to the point where they're championship ready. So I think you give Steph a little bit of help so it doesn't do a ton of wear and tear on his body for this year, and you're not going to make a deep run, so you get that salary dump, you get off the books in the cap situation, and then going into next year, whoever you do bring in, maybe they can be a piece that they use this year in order to build that continuity starting now. So going into next year, now you can bring in another guy and maybe get a free agent so that Steph and possibly Clay, if you trade him, I get that too if it's for good value. But I think they need to break up this big three and leave Steph to bring him some real help with size and wing defense because this team just can't defend right now. And it was encouraging to see Kuminga and Wiggins play together. There was one specific instance where they switched between Levine and DeRozan, I believe, and it worked out. And that looked really good, but it's just not the continuity isn't there, and they don't know how to play with each other. So I think they do need to make a splash trade, if anything, to do a salary dump and get ready for going into next year because they're not winning it now.
That's Magic, Dan.
Good job, Magic. Want to get to a break?
Oh, no. We still got some time left here, brother.
That's why I was cutting off.
You're trying to get rid of me, buddy.
No, it's look, ideally, yeah, that sounds good, but then it becomes, well, who are you trading for, and who are you giving up? Is really sort of where we're at. It's not a matter of that you need an upgrade. I think we can all agree with that. It's just that, are you willing to move off of Kuminga and Wiggins? And I heard Podziemski's name thrown in for some of the scenarios of bringing back DeJounte Murray.
Everyone's on the table except for Curry.
That's right.
Pretty much. That was the Shams Charania report. Jesus, I can get this thing out here. Look, Dan, I think
which is the ultimate overreaction in my estimation. But go ahead.
What do you mean?
This idea that everybody's safe except Steph. Like, to me, if that's coming from Lacob, that's just that's an owner who's also a fan and is pissed off and is basically telling everybody, following another disheartening, embarrassing loss where you got booed, basically acting in sort of a moment of emotion. I don't, maybe that's the case, but if you're going to blow it up, well, what is it again that you're bringing back? So to me, that's just emotion. Like, everybody's safe except Steph. Well, okay, that's fine, but who's coming in return? If they're not as good as Clay and Kuminga and everybody that's on that roster right now, well, then that's just, you're just blowing smoke. Like, to me, that's a guy who's being an owner that just wants to say something for the sake of saying something because it's a good sound pop or a good sound bite. What does that really mean at the end of the day?
I agree it was reactionary to getting booed at home. Like, if Lacob's sitting there courtside and maybe actually, I don't even know if he was bothered so much by the boos because he himself has been booed before and he still turned this franchise into 4-time champs, or it was a major, major part of it. Got them to San Francisco. But I think what pissed him off more was people leaving, was a half-empty Chase Center by the end of the buzzer against the Pelicans and the Raptors, to be honest. People were leaving in droves, and that's going to tick off an owner. So I'm with you that report was reactionary to what happened the last 2 home games. And I'm also with you that I don't really think it means that everyone is on the table. But, like, if the Warriors could go out and get, and they can't, if they could get Paul George for Klay Thompson, like they would trade, or you know, if they could get Kawhi Leonard or some other star player for Klay Thompson, that would be an option. And we haven't heard that before. We've never heard that either Klay or Dre have been on the trading block, except for, I think, when Klay was involved with the Kevin Love rumors back like early in his career. That's the only time I've ever heard Klay Thompson involved in trade talks.
And Lakin wanted him out the door, if you'll recall.
He did. Thank God for Jerry West. So, look, I mean, the Warriors at the deadline, they have a lot of players that are more valuable to Golden State than to other teams. But I do think, to Magic's point and a couple of our callers, I do think you have to consider consolidating and looking ahead to next year, because you naturally have $72 million coming off the books in Klay Thompson and also Chris Paul. And I'm inclined to believe that Klay Thompson's going to be back next year. I think it's just about finding the right number. And I think he wants to be back. I think the Warriors want him back. A game like last night is the reason why I think Klay is probably going to be back next year, because he still has it in him to be a 30-5 type of player, to hit big shots, to shoulder an offense from time to time. And I'm just not sure someone like Andrew Wiggins, though he has the ability to play like he did last night, to me, he can't be, or I haven't seen him since the finals, and really outside of the finals, be the second best option on a team that's winning a lot of games at a high level. So, look, I mean, it'd be nice for him to show up again in Milwaukee tonight. If he doesn't, would I be shocked? No, because that's kind of the player he's been.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of that Milwaukee game, if ever there was a scheduled loss, like, good luck on that.
Yeah, I'm not expecting the best. And in fact, if you just ramble for a minute, I'll go check the line here.
Yeah, so it's, well, really quick. So they got back-to-back. You just beat Chicago.
-9.5.
That's about right. So for those of you, listen.
Dan's a sharp, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, I'm just telling you, because not only is it a back-to-back against one of the best teams in the NBA, right, and you're obviously shorthanded, but it's also, they had to get on a bus and go from Milwaukee. I think it's like 90 minutes in sub-zero temperatures out there in the Midwest right now. That's just getting, like the rest of the country, just getting smashed. Don't expect much tonight. And I guess if we were doing this show tomorrow, it's going to be an entirely different complexion. I just wouldn't read too much into a Warriors getting smashed tonight. In fact, I kind of expect it. So,
I think people are with you. So that was the opening line, 9.5.
What's it at now?
11.5.
There you go.
The money's coming in hot on Milwaukee. I could see the Warriors covering that 11.5, but that's also because Milwaukee scores a lot. Like, actually, the game last night in Chicago is kind of what tonight could be. Yeah, Milwaukee can't stop a nosebleed. Like, they stink defensively and have stunk since they traded Drew Holiday, because a lot of their team is pretty similar to last year. But they can't stop a nosebleed, and Giannis Antetokounmpo might be, he might be incredible. He is incredible, top 5 player in basketball, but he can't do it all. And that's kind of like, that's where I'm at with Draymond. Like, I think Draymond's still a solid defender, but Giannis Antetokounmpo at this stage in his career is a better defender than Draymond is, and not even he can stop all the leaking parts of their ship. Like, Draymond's going to come in. He's going to help the Warriors. I saw Uncle Looney on YouTube post that they're 13th in net rating, or defensive rating, with Draymond Green in. That's still not championship level defense. Like, a The reason why they won the 2022 championship, in my opinion, was they were the number one defensive team. They were pretty middle of the pack or slightly above average offensively, but they got stops when they needed to. They could switch. They were versatile. Draymond was a better defender. Clay was a better defender. Curry was a better defender. And Wiggins was in prime form. Otto Porter Jr. was a guy that could start finals games. Like they had, GP2 was, of course, available. They were a great defensive team. That's how they won the title 2 years ago. I have a hard time seeing them getting back to that level or even close to it, even if Draymond Green comes back.
Well, they're going to be better defensively, but you're right. Is he an elite defender? Is he all NBA? Probably not, but he's a notch below that. But it's not even physically what he provides defensively. But again, it gets back to what it is that Steve Kerr said that this team was lacking: spirit, confidence, and belief. It's those intangibles. It's the things. How often do we talk about Draymond Green and saying you can't measure his success by looking at a stat sheet? Everything that he does it's those immeasurables, right? It is the spirit, it's the confidence, it's the belief, which you can clearly see this team is lacking. I think it's that as much as anything else to go along with what I think would be an upgrade defensively. Maybe not to the extent of what it was 2 years ago, but all of that together, I think, is why you clearly see a void when he's not on the floor.
Well, let's sneak Mitch in New Jersey in before we hit a break here on Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you on 95.7 The Game. What's up, Mitch? How you doing?
Good, guys. How we doing, Evan? Dan, thanks for taking the call.
Yep.
I say you got to keep Wiggins and Dominga. They're a young foundation. Try to get something for Draymond Green. I don't know why he's coming back. I don't think that punishment fits the crime, to tell you the truth. But you got to keep those two guys. And I agree with you. Curry's a keeper. That's a no-brainer. But anybody else, you get something. Even Mooney, you got to like what he does. He's the perfect center for that type of team. But Wiggins and Domingo are keepers, I think.
Thanks, Mitch. I mean, again, in a perfect world, I think they are ideal. Like, you need wings to play at a high level in the NBA. You look at what Denver's got. They got Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. KCP's a solid two-way player. Like, you need length, you need size, and Wiggins and Kuminga in a perfect world should provide that. I guess I'm just not bullish on the idea they're going to turn it around.
There's still time, though. I think you would agree with me there that you don't want to trade Wiggins tomorrow, or do you?
No, I want to continue to see what he's got.
Got it. And I think that might be sort of where everybody should be at. Let Draymond come back and just assess this team at least 3 weeks to a month from now.
Well, they got until February 8th, so a little less than a month to figure out what they're going to do at the deadline. I'll ask you this. Do you think they make a move between now and the deadline?
Well, I will say this.
Maybe we can get into that.
You know what? But here's the tease, is that in Mike Dunleavy, I trust. I'll tell you what, man, this guy does not get enough, and that's where I want to go coming back, is that Mike Dunleavy right now, man, you do you. Even if it doesn't make sense to any of us, I completely feel comfortable with you dealing those cards, man, because you have proven in a very brief time that you know what the hell's going on.
And I think he's equipped to make some difficult decisions based on where he's been, based on his track record as a player, as well as a legacy of a former coach. And, of course, in addition to his acclamation with the Warriors front office being under the tutelage of Bob Myers and understanding the inner workings of the Warriors. We're going to continue this on the other side when we come back on Warriors This Week. 888-957-9570 is the number if you want to get in on the conversation. That's Dan Devone. My name is Evan Giddings. We're back after this on 95.7 The Game.
So you're in the middle of a kitchen update, and you can't tell if that's a faucet stem or a flange. With the
Chicago Bulls. We got Draymond Green being reinstated. He is ramping up. He could be available as early as later on today when they take on the Bucks at 5 o'clock. They got booed twice at home. Gave up 76, 73, and 75 in the last three first halves, but they walk away with at least their first game on the road trip with a good taste in their mouth, offensively outshoot the Chicago Bulls, and they beat them to kind of get back on track. But what we're talking about, Dan, is the moves that may still need to be made, and whether or not last night's game, overshadows what transpired each of the last two home games. It doesn't completely remove the stench, I think, that was coming off of the Warriors in my mind, but it's certainly a step in the right direction. And so now you brought up right before the break the potential aggression or lack thereof that Mike Dunleavy Jr. might have to have at the trade deadline as GM, and what kind of guy you think he is, what kind of aggressive moves you think he might make. To me, I think the 650 hits the nail on the head here. On the Comcast Business text line, Dunleavy's reputation as a player was passive, to say the least. Just ask Don Nelson. We can only hope he is different as a GM. I think the word passive is probably the best word to describe Dunleavy.
Well, certainly not as a GM, though. I think that he was anything but passive as far as some of the moves that he's pulled in his early stay with the Warriors. I don't know that your style of play as a basketball player translates as to whether or not you'd be a good general manager. I'm trying to think. Danny Ainge was sort of punkish on the floor back in the day with the Boston Celtics, and he's
also intelligent,
very good. Yeah, smart guy. But all I know is what I know, and that is Dunleavy in a brief time has come up gold, man, and that's what you're looking for. And not only it's the way he's done it, right? He's bold. This is. When I like GMs, or if GMs to me are going to be successful, they have to be visionaries, and they got to be guys that are so removed from what it is that we do, what it is that the fans are saying, what it is that Frank from Livermore has to say on line 3, what it is that anybody at ESPN or any of the so-called, millions of coaches out there that know better than the general managers that are actually have their finger on the pulse. And when he traded for Chris Paul, that to me just spoke volumes. Like, whoa, what did you just do in your first move, essentially, as the new guy replacing Bob Myers? You went and got who? Chris Paul? Not only do Warrior fans hate this guy, but current Warriors on your team don't like this dude. And I think we'd all have to agree that prior to the injury, it's worked. And then he follows that up with Brandon Podziemski. You're like, okay, wait a minute. Dunleavy? If there's one thing the Warriors don't need, it's a guard, for crying out loud. Splash Brothers, hello. And Podziemski looks like he might be if you were to redraft, as they like to do, he might be the third player off the board if you were to do it all over again.
Yeah, he's a lottery pick.
And then Trayce Jackson-Davis at 57 might be the modern-day Draymond Green in terms of steals in the draft. And this guy's done this in less than 6 months. So when it comes to all of the conjecture, the crossroads, are we going to blow it up? You and I are talking about Wiggins. Jonathan Kuminga continues to be the X factor. I'll just say this. From what I've seen in a brief sample size, hey, listen, Dunleavy, you get into the lab and you do you, because in Dunleavy I trust. And I think it might be something that's going to shock us one of two ways. That he's going to trade guys, or you're going to we'll probably get on the air here and say, what the hell was that? And or he's not going to trade anybody, which it also could be one of those, are you kidding me? But Dunleavy has proven, at least in a brief time, that he's a guy that not only has pushed the right buttons, but it's the way he's done it, because he's really sort of done it his own way. None of these were popular moves. And again, you can only compare and contrast to the guy that he replaced, and that is Bob Myers, who, if Bob Myers' track record over the last 3 to 5 years was any sort of an indicator, he stayed about 3 to 5 years later than he should have. And I will tell you that this is just from the optics. You'd see Dunleavy sitting there with Bob Myers, and it looked like a a Hugo Boss men's clothing line in their $5,000 suits, and you're thinking, okay, Dunleavy is just this, he's a Bob Myers 2.0, and he's just going to basically follow the status quo, and here we go again. But no, Dunleavy, he is a guy that is clearly doing it a different way, and he's come up roses. And so I think it's really interesting and fascinating that a lot of what we're about to witness going forward is going to fall on this guy's shoulders.
I think Dunleavy is well equipped to make all these choices. The difficult ones you're talking about, and also some of the more clear ones. To me, I think why Dunleavy has my confidence right now is because I think he's made just about the most of as you can out of not so good choices. Like at the point at which he became general manager, you kind of had to choose between Poole and Draymond. Whether you like it or not, those two players clearly could not coexist together. And he made the choice of Draymond Green. I thought that was a pretty clear choice. Steve Kerr talked about how they need Draymond to win a championship. He's a member of the core. So unfortunately, Jordan Poole's the guy that's got to go. You flip him into CP3. I don't know if that's, to me, that was a good move because you hit a couple of nails. You get a player that's the opposite of Jordan Poole in terms of being a leader and buttoned up and a guy who can basically control the team, be a general, but you also, remove kind of like, I guess, some inexperience, some youth. But I think that was a move you had to make. I think it was. And Dario Saric appears to be a decent signing. We'll see what he does at the deadline. I think Dunleavy is a guy that isn't, he doesn't want to come in and shake things up. And I like that about him. But I think he's smart enough to understand that this isn't a team as currently constructed that can win a championship. And if the goal of his boss, Joe Lacob, is to win a championship, then he does eventually need to, I think, make some even tougher choices. And so I think so far he's done a good job, but I think he's going to have to make some tougher choices at the deadline. And that will be really when we figure out what kind of general manager he is, because I think the choices this summer were kind of laid out for him.
I think the big question for the general manager and or the Golden State Warriors, and whether Steve Kerr's in on this meeting or not, it's inevitable and it's coming, maybe sooner rather than later, is what do you do with the Hall of Fame core, and where are you at in terms of words like loyalty and allegiance when it comes to Steph, Draymond, and Klay? Now, I think we can all agree that Steph isn't going anywhere, but when it comes to Draymond Green and to Klay Thompson, if you can improve your basketball team, do you trade them? To me, I'm on record, hell yes. It's not a slight on either one of those guys. It's not being callous. This is professional sports. And this is, if you want to stay relevant and continue to win, much like that of Bill Walsh back on the day with the San Francisco 49ers, he would trade players a year sooner rather than a year later. And that's the way you have to be. You have to be really crass when you look at this sort of thing. And so if you're going to get tied into sentimentality and have any sort of emotional attachment to these players, well, that's fine, but you're not going to be very good. And it may be a long time before, listen, Warrior fans that can go back before this dynastic run they know what it's like to be in that lottery for decades, all right? So, dynasties come to an end, but I think the next question for all of those that pull the trigger on these sort of things, and whether it's Dunleavy in a room by himself, is going to be, do you move off on Draymond? Will you move off on Klay Thompson? Or is that hindered because of that loyalty component? And I would think, at least I'd like to think, that when it comes to specifically Klay Thompson, if I can upgrade my basketball team, I'm sorry, Klay, I got to shake your hand and thank you for everything you've done. And listen, man, I'll rename the San Francisco Bay, that thing you get stoned in and swim in every other day, man. I'll name a street after you. We'll bring you back for Klay Day, and we'll stop everything that the Bay Area is doing. We'll make it a holiday for 3 consecutive days. But in the here and now, if I can get rid of you, and for what I think is an upgrade to help my basketball team win in the future, I'm sorry, but here's the door, and thank you very much.
Yeah, look, I think all that's well said, but I also don't think, Dan, you're at the point to where there's a move out there you see that could improve the basketball team that would involve Draymond or Klay. At least that's how I see it. Like, I don't think the Warriors are in a position where they can go out and make a move by trading Klay or trading Draymond, moving off those guys, and all of a sudden become markedly better. And I think that is a distinction that you have to make and that Dunleavy has to weigh if he is to eventually move off of a member of the big three or two of the three, not named Steph Curry. You have to almost ensure that the team is going to be competitive because you can't move off members of a dynasty and not have anything to replace them with from a marketing standpoint, from entertainment value, and of course from competition. Genius it was for Bill Walsh to move off of players a year before they were done. Well, that's because you could move off Montana. You had Steve Young. Like, you could move off of certain players because you had replacements. You also, when you were going to hang it up as a head coach, you had George Seifert who could continue what you did. The Warriors, I don't think, are in a position where they have something to offer from either a young core perspective or a potential move out there that would be able to replace those guys that you're talking about.
No, you're absolutely right. And these are just hypotheticals.
Sure.
That I think that the improvement of the basketball team does not necessarily in the here and now involve either one of those guys. My point being is that when that day of reckoning does come and you're looking to improve your basketball team in whatever regard, whatever vein, then I think that the conversation that has to be had is what it is that I just laid out, that there cannot be that emotional attachment. But you're right. I don't think that getting rid of those guys right now, because again, that's the only, through a vacuum and through this specific lens, that what is it that makes my basketball team better now and in the future? That's the only way by which you can measure or move forward as a general manager of the Golden State Warriors.
Well, let's see what Uncle Gene has to say out in Oakland. 888-957-9570 is the number. What do you think Mike Dunleavy Jr. should do at the deadline? Do you think he needs to get aggressive? Should he stand pat? Do you still think the Warriors are in a place where they can experiment, where they can evaluate? 888-957-9570. What's up, Gene? You're on with Dan Devone and Evan Giddings here on Warriors This Week.
Yeah, good morning, fellas. Thanks for taking my call. I wasn't exactly prepared to answer that question, but what should he do? I still think we should try to be in the market for a wing defender. I mean, that's really what we need. Our defense is absolutely atrocious. This is probably the worst defense we've had. Significantly generates with the rest of the team. That's what I expect. I wanted to say something quickly about Wiggins because I'm on the same wavelength as you, Dan. Actually, if I had been able to call in last Friday, yesterday, I would have also screamed, please don't trade this guy yet, at least until we know what's really going on with him. Because as far as we knew, there was nothing physically wrong. So it was all emotional or mental or something. And unless he had gone to the team and said, hey, I want to be traded, I want out of here, or unless there really was something physical that we were unaware of, look, he's our best hope in terms of being the most experienced and, skilled, and successful player going forward once the big three are gone. All right. So it was wonderful seeing him play well last night. I'm hoping this is finally the turning point for him. And moving forward, I don't want to see the core broken up. I don't know that I have statistics or anything more than just gut feeling to base this on, but those three I think are connected at the hip. You might even throw Kerr in there. So my feeling is that once one of those guys is gone or can't play anymore, that truly is the end of the dynasty. And I'm still holding on to the fading hope that somehow, some way, they might still get that fifth ring.
Well, you'd love to get a fifth ring. I think that's why people are talking about Gene potentially breaking up the core. I'm not advocating for that at all, and I don't think Dan is either. What we're talking about is if you have an opportunity to improve, if you have an opportunity to move closer towards a fifth title, well, then everyone except for Stephen Curry should be on the table, right?
Yeah, and he brings up, just to getting back, and this sort of goes along with what it is that you were talking about at the top of the show, that the defense has just been so atrocious. I would argue that they do have adequate wing defenders. Kuminga is a good guy out on the perimeter typically in terms of defense, and Wiggins, that's where he cut his teeth and got the moniker as a two-way player because of what it is that he did really 2 years ago. So he can do it. It's just that I think, Ev, that you can't look at this exclusively that the Golden State Warriors have been so bad defensively and got spanked in the last 2 games at home without sort of seeing it that across the board, the NBA is just sort of in this pattern right now, whether it's because of refereeing right now that I think clearly caters towards offensive output. And not only that every team has shot makers. And that maybe because it's a perfect storm that, as you alluded to, January is just always a weird month. Mm-hmm. But just look across what's happening in the league. Everybody's getting blown out. It's complete. What's up is down. What's down is up. January has been, if you're to use that as a barometer, I don't know that that's necessarily accurate. And I think that maybe the Warriors got just caught up in a lot of what has been bad defense from just about everybody at the NBA at some point. So I don't know that it's an indictment that they don't have wing defenders or that they're bad defensively as much as it is just this is happening to everybody.
Oh, yeah, I'm still in wait-and-see mode, but that doesn't mean that I don't believe... All right, here's where I'm at. Like, the Wiggins thing, to me, is the most obvious piece to try and move for multiple reasons. I'm not saying last night was fool's gold, but I have not seen enough of Wiggins playing at that level for me to feel comfortable with him being around for 3 more years. And when I look at what the Warriors have on their books, you obviously have Curry. You obviously have Draymond. I do think they're going to extend an offer to Klay Thompson, and they're probably going to be able to come to an agreement. I can't have 4 contracts in addition to what you're probably going to have to pay Kuminga because he's extension eligible this summer. I can't have 4, maybe even 5 or 6 long-term deals for a team that has been around 500 for the majority of the season. I can't do it. I understand this is a wing-driven league, but to me, best case scenario is, and again, we're waiting and seeing, but best case scenario is Wiggins does find a semblance of his old self, and you're able to improve his value to the point where you can make a move that doesn't include adding someone like Kuminga or adding a valuable first-round pick. I just think that the Warriors are in a natural parting position with this guy. They've gotten everything they can out of him. He's a big reason why they won the championship. He's been paid handsomely, and I think he needs a change of scenery. And I think it would be good for both sides to, when the trade deadline comes, and the Warriors have, I think, 12 or 13 games to make that decision, to move on, help the Warriors get something back, and help them move towards next season, retooling to try and make another run next year. I think that Wiggins has been too inconsistent for me to trust him in the future, and I just don't feel comfortable with him being on the roster for 3 more years. That's why I would move him. It's not because I don't think he's a good guy. It's not because I don't think he can play like he could last night on occasion, but because I don't think he can recapture what he found in 2022 and really what he's not been able to find since he had his 2.5-month hiatus. I think he's in a different headspace, and I think he needs a change of scenery. So the trade would be as much for Andrew Wiggins as for the Golden State Warriors. And as much as he was, yes, with Wiggins, a +1 last night in 7 minutes. Prior to, they'd been a -84 in 25 minutes. And I guess I'm just more inclined to believe that that's probably where this thing is going to be most of the time, as opposed to last night in Chicago, where they were finally able to put it together.
I mentioned this earlier in the show that, and using the Toronto Raptors as an example, and Pascal Siakam, it just seemed like it was inevitable that he was going to get dealt. OG Anunoby was out the door. I think they even came out with a public statement that they're not going to wait till the trade deadline to move off on Siakam and his contract. I think that Toronto and not to just to focus on the Raptors and go north of the border, but Toronto did not want to be left holding the bag like they were a couple of years ago when Kawhi left as a free agent. And Fred VanVleet, to a certain degree, did the same thing to them last year. And they certainly did not want Pascal Siakam to walk out the door and they get nothing in return. So it just seemed like it was an inevitability that he was going to get traded. And then all of a sudden, as Anunoby leaves, they get back R.J. Barrett, and they get back Quickly, and Scotty Barnes, who's now...
That was a mutually beneficial deal. I mean, the Knicks have been hot since they got Anunoby.
Very good. And now they're beginning to reassess Pascal Siakam and how he's playing so well with this, this new team, this new refaced team of the Toronto Raptors. And I say all of that just simply to say that the Golden State Warriors, their best option right now might be patience. And I know that's difficult to do, especially when you have Lacob overreacting, in my estimation, that everybody's going except Steph, that you just have to exert a level of wait and see. Because much like that of Pascal Siakam, that it was a foregone conclusion he was traded, if Andrew Wiggins can somehow turn it on and be that guy that at age 28, and with the return again of Draymond Green, that he unlocks maybe Andrew Wiggins, and that it works with Jonathan Kuminga, and then Trace Jackson Davis and Brandon Podziemski and all these kids and veterans, and the balance is there. And again, just to use history as a reference, the Lakers of a year ago were able to turn it around. The Celtics of 2 years ago were able to turn it around. And so trading everybody or making rash decisions in January, I just don't think is the wisest decision, especially as it relates to the Golden State Warriors going forward.
Yeah, unless there's a move that can immediately upgrade you, I don't think the Warriors are going to do anything because they're kind of stuck in a position where I think they don't want to come off of pieces that teams naturally want. The deal you're talking about between Toronto and New York, well, New York didn't want to pay, it appeared, R.J. Barrett to continue to pay him, and they didn't want to pay evidently Emmanuel Quickly, or they would prefer to pay someone like OG Anunoby. So that worked for both of them. I think the Warriors are looking for that kind of deal, not the wings, but a mutually beneficial deal for both sides, because that, I think, is their best option to keep what they have, keep what's valuable, but also send off something that will help set them up more for the future. I think it's Wiggins. If you disagree, I want to hear from you. 888-957-9570. We're back with our final segment up until 12 o'clock right here on Warriors This Week. Dan Devone, Evan Giddings with you on 95.7 The Game.
I bet you folks are glad to be done with your shopping. Hopefully, all your gifts went well. But there's one last store to visit.
Thompson, another triple. He's got 24. He loves this building.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
One last segment here on Warriors This Week. Evan Giddings alongside Dan Devone. And Dan, I got to give you some props, man. You talked about scheduled losses, and I think we might have one on our hands for the Golden State Warriors tonight. 5 o'clock tip in Milwaukee. Of course, you can catch it all here on 95.7 The Game. Mark Randy's got your pre and post Tim Roy on the call. But as of 40 seconds ago, Anthony Slater of The Athletic, also a Warriors insider here at 95.7 The Game, tweeted this. Steph Curry is out tonight in Milwaukee. Rest. It's his third missed game of the season, first due to rest. It was at 11.5. That thing is about to balloon. You better hop on Milwaukee while you can.
That's going to be off the board.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's a good decision.
That stinks.
I think you just got to be smart about this. It's, after this you got Memphis and you got Utah. Dan. But it's like, I would sit Clay as well. This is not going to, this is.
Quinones. Lester.
But you know what? On sort of a serious note, like they're not going to, I think it's a long shot to say the least to try and be competitive tonight, but that's okay. This is just, this is the attrition that is the NBA when you got to go to Chicago, Milwaukee, Chicago, Milwaukee this time of the year where it's like minus 10 degrees out there and you're taking a bus. But think about this, just when you're talking about the depth that is the Warriors this year, how often have we talked about the absence of GP2, Chris Paul, Moses Moody wasn't available, and Draymond Green? Now, if this was a year ago, that probably in what we like to call in our shows here at the top of our rundown. But now, because they have so much depth that, all right, next man up. Kuminga gets more run. Here comes Trayce Jackson-Davis. And although they're maybe not as good, but they're more equipped to handle, I think, when you're suffering some of those losses.
Yeah, and that's why it really sucks that we didn't talk about this much, but Moses Moody is missing the road trip, it appears, with a calf strain that he suffered in the Pelicans game, and he's coming off back-to-back 21-point performances. It does suck on a night like this that he's not available because he would get plenty of run.
Sure.
Like we saw Jerome Robinson in the game last night for the Warriors, and this would be a natural game to just say, hey, you know what, young guys, get in there, play 42 minutes tonight, see what you got against a really good Milwaukee Bucks team, see what you can do. And the one thing that you want to see tonight is what we didn't see the last two games of the homestand, which is effort. And we saw it last night in Chicago. You want to see effort, you want to see energy, and win or loss, that's all you can really ask for in a situation like this. So unfortunately, the news coming down from Anthony Slater that Steph Curry is out tonight against the Milwaukee Bucks. 5 o'clock tip here on 95.7 The Game. Let's get out to Mark in Millbrae. Wants to talk about one of the favorite young studs for the Warriors. What's up, Mark? You're on Warriors This Week with Dan and Evan.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Yeah, to me, I would like to see Kuminga just be relegated back to the sixth man. I think he's much more effective and could be much more of a focal point for the Warriors. We definitely know with Draymond is back in the near future here. I just feel like that's the impact he can have is being a sixth man as opposed to a starter. I know he's upset because he feels like he is at this point, but I just think he's too inconsistent at this point. He's obviously got some major talent and he can flash, but I just think with the second unit, you see he's much more like last night. He can be much more impactful and effective. And I just think the lineup that Kerr's got to go is with the four veterans, obviously Draymond, and he can be the first guy off the bench. And obviously he can play huge minutes. You can give him 25, 30-plus minutes per game depending on the flow of the game and how well he's playing. But as you saw last night, I think that would be much better of his role. As far as the Warriors, tonight, I didn't think, barring some major upset, they were going to beat Milwaukee. I thought, to me, the two games they would get, the Bulls playing some good basketball. That was a nice win on the road, snapping their win streak. And then Memphis, and we thought Utah would be a win, but Utah's been playing some great basketball. So I think overall, guys, the thing that's been the most disappointing about the season is how poorly they played at home. I think looking back at this season, if they come up short and early in the playoffs, because the one thing we can count on is how impressive as a home team they've had and how many times they've either blown out or gagged away games with the big leads. I think is going to be the story and why they're going to struggling to be a play-on team at this point. So we're going to wait for the trade deadline and see what moves they make. But as far as their home games now, we can't even count on them to beat anybody or struggle against even the worst teams. So get your takes on that. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, I mean, look, and I know people have been asking, too, about Draymond's availability. Nothing updated on there. It looks like Draymond, as of now, is going to miss another game here while he ramps back up. And in addition to, of course, GP2's out, CP3's out, Moses Moody is out, and now Steph Curry's out. So you're down 5 rotation players. We're probably going to see some that. Look, yeah, I'm sorry, I left out Guy Santos, I left out Usman Garuba. Left out, a couple of these guys at the bottom of the roster we haven't seen much of this season, but they're going to get some run tonight. Hopefully a lot of pods as well. Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not throw the young guys in there?
Just getting back to last night's game, I think the caller alluded to how the Warriors have not been able to play well at home, but how about that Ring of Honor last night?
Dude, oh.
What? What are your thoughts? Like, I just crack it up because it was like...
Oh, trying to rile me up in the last 20 minutes.
No, go ahead. Well, my only take was like, they're introducing, he's a 6-time NBA champion. He's a 7-time NBA All-Star. He's a 3-time Scottie Pippen. Meanwhile, the Searchlight's looking for him. And he's lawn bowling in his crib in Malibu, man.
Do we know what team that was for? Was that just in honor of the three-peat? Like,
that I do not know.
Because I think, well, you could send any of those teams into the Ring of Honor. At least Rodman sent in a video. I think... Did MJ send in a video?
Yeah, he had the last video.
Yeah. So that from top to bottom, primarily because of the fans, in addition to, of course, MJ and Pippen not being able to be in the same room together, I guess, was absolutely horrible. And I'm with everyone that roasted the fans in Chicago that booed Jerry Krause. Because that was shameful. That was one of the most just like horrible things I've seen this season. And I understand no one got hurt from it. No one was throwing things. But first of all, respect the dead. I mean, Jesus, what are we doing here? Respect the dead. His wife's in attendance. You're booing a guy that, whether you like it or not, is a big reason why you won 6 titles. I don't care that he may have been a reason that people feel like the team was broken up. Go watch The Last Dance. You'll see it wasn't completely his fault. And I know some people in Chicago were talking about how it could have been avoidable by just, showing the wife first or I guess setting it up better, like, because he's not a popular figure in Chicago. Jerry Krause isn't. But come on, like, we're better as a society, I thought.
Well, it's Chicago, so there's a deep... that when it comes to sports, those relationships run pretty deep. I shouldn't laugh, but I think a lot of that is, you nailed it. It's The Last Dance. And I think that a lot of when's the last time, because that was during the pandemic. And so when's the last time that they've all collectively been able to be in a stadium since The Last Dance to voice what it is that they felt together with Jerry Krause's, his face on the big screen. So I think a lot of that was just, their first opportunity to sort of collectively, as a community, voice what it is that The Last Dance and sort of the emotional thoughts and opinions sort of coming to the forefront there.
Yeah, we'll let Steve Kerr talk about that, because here's what he had to say.
I didn't hear it. I was in the locker room, but somebody just told me about it, and it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful. I cannot believe. I'm devastated for Thelma and for the Krause family. What can we possibly be thinking? I cannot believe that the fans... And you have to understand, when you hear boos, it's not all of them, right? So the fans who booed, they know who they are, and that's, to me, it's absolutely shameful, and I'm devastated by that, because it's just what are we doing? Whether people liked Jerry or not, whether they disagreed with the decision to move on from whatever we're here to celebrate that team. Jerry did an amazing job building that team. And last night was all about the joy and the love that team shared with the city. And I'm so disappointed in the fans. And I want to be specific, because there were lots of fans, I'm sure, who did not boo. But those who booed, they should be ashamed.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with it. And I also don't think that, look, karma's a B, man. You got 48 hung on you in the third quarter after booing a dead man. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I've got to play it again, but wasn't The Last Dance pretty much put him in a bad light, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of like the name says it all. The Last Dance was because Jerry Krause came out publicly said, I'm getting rid of everybody.
Yeah, but I think the doc also explained why that was just a natural breaking point. Like, it had kind of led to that. And Krause was involved with it, but it was also Phil Jackson. It was also MJ being kind of done. It was also Scottie Pippen signing a contract that he probably shouldn't have signed, and then blaming Jerry Krause for it, and then that causing some internal strife. You know, like, I mean, look, they won 6 championships. Yeah. I don't know what else you want. It's like Warriors fans saying that, you know, the Warriors should have won 6 titles. It's like, if things work out the way they do, and blaming an executive for failing to, I guess, extend something that was at a natural end, to me is a little overboard.
Okay, how's this? If The Last Dance is never made, do they still boo him last night? Like, because I think one.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, well, at least from what I was listening to some of the post game on the Chicago side. The Score was talking about it after the game because that was a big talking point. And the city of Chicago, I think, blames Jerry Krause for that team breaking up. Like, he's the guy that they blame for that. And he certainly had a hand in it, but he's not the only reason that happened. And Steve Kerr's also talked about it, about how it was just kind of a natural point. Everyone knew and was on board throughout the season. So, no, I think they would have booed him regardless. And it was terrible that his wife had to endure that.
I guess I came across a little harsh. Somebody saying that Devone would have fit in perfectly according to the text line with those Bulls fans that booed Krause. No, I'm not saying boo the guy. I know it's not popular.
The people that booed.
The people that booed, but I guess my point in all of this is that same thing, Philadelphia and New York and Chicago have a tendency to be idiots. It's fans. It's dudes with beers in their hands who are sitting there. It's like, it's not the mayor. It's not, I don't get, I know that fans in general should do the right thing. They shouldn't throw a cup of water on Kyrie Irving in Boston when he went and stamped on the logo on the Shamrock as he left. But I'm sorry, man. Like, it's just, I don't hold them maybe in a high level of esteem to begin with. Not that fans are not smart people, but just, you know, it's Chicago and it's The Last Dance. And yeah, I think that in a perfect world, don't boo Jerry Krause. What are you, an idiot? But to be honest with you, a lot of them are idiots. And that's just sort of the fandom when it comes to sort of the Chicagos and the Phillies and the Bostons and that part of the world.
Yeah, and it sucks that probably a small percentage of the fans last night were being casted in the light that they were, or revealed themselves, however you want to say it. Like, that does suck. I'm with you. Like, I think 5% of fans are bad eggs. Like, that doesn't mean that 95% of fans aren't great, aren't respectful, aren't knowledgeable. And I feel lucky that we have a lot of those people that are Warriors fans and also chime into our shows, that listen to us from 9 to noon, that listen to our weekday shows, of course, from 6 to 6, and disagree with us, agree with us. Maybe they boo us at their houses. I don't know. But to do that last night, I thought that was just wrong.
Hey, I want to get into Kerr for a little bit before we get out of here.
Yeah, let's do it.
This week the week that was, I'm wondering if that had any sort of influence on Steve Kerr in his impending decision as to whether or not he's coming back. I don't know, people putting him on the hot seat. Maybe it's not in his hands. Maybe he gets fired. He signs a new contract. But, you know, he was good friends with Pete Carroll. Like, those two are really tight. In fact, they had an awesome podcast. I only think they did like a handful of shows. Maybe one of the greatest names for a podcast. It was called Flying Coach.
Yep.
Awesome. Like, those two dudes, they found each other sort of later in life, if you will. And
Kerr credits him for helping him with his coaching philosophy.
Exactly.
Like, he was one of the first people that he called. And it was, I think, in the podcast you're referencing, how Pete Carroll said the first thing you have to do as a head coach is create pillars. And foundational pillars that are philosophical, but relate to how you want to implement your style as a head coach. And it clearly worked because he was successful.
And I'm just curious with him leaving or getting fired, even when you look at Saban, and Saban recognizing that, although he wouldn't say this publicly, but nothing's changed more than college sports, right? With NIL, transfer portal, I don't think Saban recognized it's time for me to move on. And so when we talk about this dynastic end or the end of the run, if you will, we saw Bob Myers jump ship. We know the relationship between those two and how they remain to be close. I'm just wondering if Steve Kerr, after seeing Pete Carroll and Saban walk away and Carroll getting, let go out in Seattle, whether he just says, you know what, it's time for me to walk. Like the end of this year, this is it's a different time. It's somebody else's time, and maybe because he's always done things a little bit differently. And I'm just curious if whether that had any sort of level of influence whatsoever.
I think that's the only way they could naturally part. I think Steve Kerr, as a 4-time champion, is in a position where if he doesn't want to be there, then that's his choice. But I don't know. I have a hard time believing at the end of the year, Lacobs or whoever, Dunleavy, is going to say, hey, Steve, we don't want you back. Because at the end of the day, and this is something that factors into all the tough decisions that the Warriors have to make and that are in front of them for the next 12 or 13 games before the deadline, is you still have Steph Curry. And if Curry wants Steve Kerr as his head coach, I imagine that Steve Kerr's going to be the head coach. And I don't get the feeling that Kerr wants to leave now.
Yeah,
he's been frustrated, but I don't get the feeling that he wants to leave.
I think I'm with you. Is that the other part of that equation is that, usually you can sort of see it on the coach, like, this is just painful, the road trips, the losing. I think he genuinely enjoys, and not to get too theatrical, I think he genuinely enjoys teaching younger men. I think he genuinely enjoys the different personalities. I think he really, more than the winning and the losing, of course he wants to win titles, but I think that there's a different, I think he's wired a little different from the average coach. I think he really finds completion. I think he finds a level of satisfaction through what he considers helping young men. And that's not only relegated to basketball.
I also don't think he is... I mean, he's a player. He's been a GM. He's been a broadcaster. He's also a businessman. And I think that if Steve Kerr's looking around the league and seeing Eric Spoelstra getting 8 for 120, and he's looking at Monty Williams getting 75, and he's looking at Greg Popovich getting near 80, he's probably like, all right, well, no, I want to be back. There's no doubt about it, but you're going to have to pay me. I mean...
Well, yeah, you got to get market value, that's for sure.
Oh, Monty Williams is the head coach of the worst team in basketball right now, and he set the standard this summer. I mean, good Lord, back up the brick truck.
Yeah, he'll get paid. I think
he should.
I'm wondering, how about this? But I don't know that that's what drives him. I mean, this is a guy that...
No, but it's also a sign of respect. Like, if you're a player looking around the league, I think that's why it's a big reason why Klay Thompson didn't take the 2 for $48 deal that he had offered this summer. Because, he wants more years, but he's also like, am I really a player that you see as being half of what I was previously making?
Yeah.
I think money's a sign of respect.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that if he comes back, he's going to get his. But I think the only thing, and it's not something that really, I think that there's just maybe a flicker of potential that this could happen. He's wired a little differently. And I'm just wondering, with Pete Carroll's departure, and when you see Saban recognizing the landscape of college football and college sports changing, that maybe Steve Kerr just recognizes this as an opportunity for me to go out. And I could see that guy coaching at the collegiate level. I mean, just because, again, I think that he gets a thrill out of helping younger people and or getting into politics. He's certainly not, he's not bashful for telling people how he feels. I just feel that maybe there's a part of me that thinks that maybe he feels as though there's bigger things in store for his life that go beyond the boundaries of coaching the Golden State Warriors.
That's fair. I mean, he definitely has a wide range of interests, and he's been outspoken politically, and I think that all factors into why I've really enjoyed his time and however much time he has left as head coach of the Golden State Warriors, is because he's not just a basketball guy. And he's had pretty much every single role that there is in basketball, as a player, as an executive, a member of the media, and now as a head coach, I think he gets it in a lot of ways. And it's really unfortunate that this season hasn't necessarily made him look the best, because he's been in the toughest coaching position he has ever. And I don't think in every single spot he's responded well to it. So, my question would be how you replace him. It's kind of the question we're asking about the big three, right? Like you're saying, so everyone's on limits or off limits except for Steph. I agree. But who would you bring in to fill that void?
Yes, right.
As a player, as a head coach, they naturally had Mike Dunleavy Jr. to step in for Bob Myers, but if they didn't have Dunleavy there, I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with the Warriors hiring someone outside of the organization as GM.
I've got the answer for Steve Kerr. Should he decide to leave, or should he no longer come back? As the Golden State Warriors, right? This is breaking
Wait
news.
till the final minutes.
Well, you know what? I'll reveal this. Do you want me to revisit this in 4 minutes?
No, I want you to tell us what it is now.
It's going to be the first player coach since I believe Dave Cowens, or maybe Lenny Wilkins or Bill Russell. They used to be player coaches. Draymond Green. Draymond Green, he knows his that high basketball IQ will translate to being a successful coach.
Draymond Green as head coach of the Golden State Warriors. Can you imagine that, John? Like, seriously?
No, I could not.
I'm drinking my breakfast again, John.
Well, I think number one, he's headed,
you are.
I think he's headed toward a career in the media, but
no doubt,
dude.
I
know you are, but man, that is a scalding hot take, and I appreciate it because it forced me to think about Draymond Green in a suit and tie, or maybe it's like a onesie. I don't know what they wear, sweatsuits now on the sidelines.
He'd be like a modern day Bob Knight. I could see him throwing a chair at a player.
Right. That's, he'll bring back old school. It's none of this, you make a turnover, but that's okay. No, you turn it over. Come over here. I'm gonna get in your face, and I'm gonna dress you down. I'm gonna get teed as a player and as a coach. So if you get teed as a coach, and so let's say you get one technical as a player, and then you're coaching and you get a tee. Does that combine as a disqualification, or is it two separate entities?
He would be the first head coach to get a flagrant 2. I think that would inevitably happen, and that would be the first time we've seen that. Dan, it's been a lot of fun, man. We dug into a lot over the course of this 3-hour show, and I know we got 7 days until the next one, but I'm always looking forward to it.
But I tell you what. And I'm not just feeding the beast here. Nothing is boring when it comes to Warriors this week. Right?
I agree, man.
You talk about a magazine show that is fully loaded every single year, every single week, man. It is. Stay right here because you have no idea where this thing's going.
And we appreciate everyone that's called in today, everyone that's chimed in on the YouTube chat powered by First NorCal Credit Union, also on Twitch. We appreciate you chiming in on the Comcast Business text line. Big thanks to our producer, John Lucan, here today. Of course, Dan Devone. My name is Evan Giddings saying so long. This edition of Warriors This Week. It's been a lot of fun. We'll talk to you next Saturday, same time, same place, 9 a.m. to noon, 95.7 The Game. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I know the Niners don't play, but we'll figure out who they play. And, of course, tune in on Monday. We got your coverage for the Warriors, NFL reaction to Wild Card Weekend, 6 to 6 on 95.7 The Game. It's been real. We'll talk to you next time.
We're a 33-win team, dude! Boy, am I glad to be done with my holiday shopping.
Oh, I know.
And now I just want to relax.
Me too. Well, except there's one more store we should check out.
No way.
Because this week, we can get a Samsung LG...